You are on, sir.
All right. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our second Zoom Board of Alderman meeting. This is not ideal, but it's something that we have to do under these conditions. So we are all looking forward to getting to the point where we can go back to our council chambers and be able to see everybody eye to eye. So, but it is what it is. So I'd like to ask you all to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, roll call vote, please.
Alderman Alder.
It'll pop up right here, and you'll just have to write it.
Here,
Alderman Alder.
here.
Here.
All right.
I'll be right back. I just want to make sure.
With my picture.
Oh, Heather, we need to see you.
There you go. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Flores.
Here.
Alderman Galloway.
Here.
Alderman Poston.
Here.
Alderman Schaefer.
Here.
Alderman Smith.
Here.
We have 6 aldermen present. We have a quorum. Thank you.
All right. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes of April the 29th?
So moved.
Need a second?
Second.
Okay, Ted seconds. Motion made by Alderman Schaefer, seconded by Alderman Smith to approve the minutes of April the 29th. All in favor?
Aye.
And it might help if you would, I mean, it's natural to say aye, but hold your hand up also, so we'll just know that everybody did. Thank you. All right, do I have a motion to approve the minutes of May the 4th?
So moved.
Second,
Motion made by Alderman Schaefer, seconded by Alderman Alder. All in favor? Okay, passed.
Mr. Mayor, point of order, please.
Yes, sir, please.
I don't know what's there's something a little bit different tonight. Whenever the aldermen are speaking, there's an echo, and I'm hearing it right now. And as a speaker, it's a little weird to talk and still hear that echo. So if there's something that we can adjust or move in there, that would be really helpful tonight.
Boy, where are we speaking into? I would assume it's the speaker on the computer.
I don't think anything has been changed, so I'm not sure what the technical difficulty might be. Is it really distorted?
It's not terrible, but you do hear yourself talk as you're trying to talk, and so we'll just try to be cognizant of it. And when Sam gets back, if there's something we can adjust, that would be great. If not, we'll make do.
I think it's feedback.
Okay. Wonder Woman to the rescue.
Sorry, guys.
So everybody online, please be patient with us while we get this figured out.
Okay, should be better.
All right, can you, Heather, would you say hi to Nathan and see if there's an echo?
hey, can you hear me? No?
Perfect, sir.
Okay,
All right. He said there was no, and they're all giving a thumbs up. Okay, thank you, Sam.
okay.
All right, we're all done here, so we'll proceed with scheduled visitors and guests. All right, first on the agenda is Greg Williams from Connell Insurance. Greg, you've got the floor, sir.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, everyone. I hope everybody's staying safe and healthy. And yes, this is definitely an odd time we're in right now, but as always, I greatly appreciate everything you're doing for your city and for the community. Sean Mayer is also on the line. Sean and I are both with Connell Insurance. I work with the city in regards to your property, your liability, and your workers' compensation. And then Sean handles the group benefits for the city as well. So just want to kind of go over a few things real quick. I know you've got several things to do tonight, but if y'all remember a couple months ago, we kind of made a decision that maybe look at some options for the city's insurance coverages. And, that being said, your current provider is Midwest Public Risk, or MPR, and they require about 90 days notice from the July 1 effective date. If you're going to be moving, if you're going to look at other options, that's a pretty standard requirement of any pool in Missouri. So you all agreed to do that. And do you guys have the slides in front of you or in your bid packet? Do you have the information from Connell? Sorry, agenda packet, sorry.
Do we have what?
I believe we sent in some information for y'all to look at. I'm going to go over it, but just showing some of the options that we provided this year.
There it is, Greg.
We see it on the screen, but I don't think it was in the packet. Was it?
No.
No. The Alderman did not get it in the packet, so they're only.
There we go. Okay. Okay, that's what I was referring to right there. So this first slide is our property or liability and our workers' compensation. Again, we're currently with Midwest Public Risk, and your current premiums for all those policies are $537,164. We are anticipating about an 8 to 10% premium increase from NPR. So that's 537,164 at best. More like we're going to be closer in the 580s or 590 range. That second option there, we see we've got it's coming in at 434,681, and that's with two different carriers. One is with HCC Public Risk, which is your property and your liability. And then for the workers' compensation would be from Missouri Employers Mutual. And then the third option is with a carrier called Travelers. You've probably heard of them. They came in at $415,363. And that's for the property, the liability, and the workers' compensation. Had a couple meetings with several of your staff members there, got some input, and our recommendation was to go with option number 2, which would be HCC Public Risk for the property and liability, and Missouri Employers Mutual for the workers' compensation. And if you'll see there, I noted a projected savings. That's off a little bit. I apologize. That's actually 102,483 rather than 438. I apologize there. One thing that really stuck out, you guys can see that the Travelers quotes were, about $19,000 less. However, on their property forms, for any claim or damage we might have due to wind or hail, there's a $50,000 deductible, and that's per location, per storm. So you all know we had some nasty weather roll in last week, and if we had some hail damage, that would be a $50,000 deductible per building. So I think we're all a little bit uncomfortable with that. The property deductible with HCC is actually $5,000, which is more in line right there. Something else to mention in regards to HCC, for your excess policy, it's called silo coverage, meaning you've got separate limits for every type of coverage, whether it be your law enforcement liability, your elected officials liability. They don't share one aggregate amount. They all have their own separate policies, if you will. We don't see that a whole lot, and that's actually a very, very robust form of coverage there. When we're talking about our workers' compensation with Missouri Employers Mutual, a couple of things I wanted to note there. They do offer a dividend plan, and some carriers do that, but MIM does that differently. It's based solely on the city of Ozark's loss history and on your performance. With NPR, your current pool, that dividend plan is based on the performance of every member within that pool, all 230 members. So if the city has a good year, but the pool as a whole does not, you probably wouldn't be subject to a deductible. So again, this is a little bit more hands-on, and I like this because all the policies, the procedures, the changes for the better that your city has made over the last few years, it's really showing. And I think you've got a good chance for an 8 to 10% dividend. That's not a done deal. I view a dividend as a bonus if we get it, but I think you've really set yourself up for some more cost savings there with things like that. Chandra and Mike Hunter and I have talked about the nurse triage program. This takes a lot of time and effort off of your staff. So if we have an injury, you literally call in and you talk to a nurse. They start the claim process for you. If it happens on a Friday evening at 4:30, you're already going to have that claim by the time Monday morning rolls around. You're already going to have it in your email. Everything is set up. It just, Chandra, I think you'd agree that it's a very nice feature to have. And Missouri Employers Mutual does do that. When we talk about return to work programs, you guys have a little bit of that in place, but let's say we have an injured employee that they can't go to their regular duties. However, they can be cleared for some light duty work. MIM actually has relationships already set up with nonprofits and other entities around here. And per state statutes, if you guys don't have any work for your employees to do, we can find work for them to do that with other programs. Rhonda Kaufman is our loss control agent with MIM. She actually lives in Millwood, so she's very close to you guys. And Rhonda is not a sit behind a desk kind of person. She likes to get out and see how she can help. She's already met with some of your staff already when they were looking at quoting this. And after the meeting and learning more about you, she definitely wanted to obviously move forward with a quote. And they'd be pretty excited to work with you all. I know that. So I know it's Monday evening. We're talking insurance. I hope I'm not boring you too much, but does anyone have any questions thus far on the property liability and work comp?
Mr. Postman?
Yeah, Mr. Williams,
Yes, sir.
is anything related to COVID in insurance right now? Is there coverage we need to be looking at? I know there was some talk about OSHA liability and making sure employers took the appropriate steps so that they're still OSHA compliant in case an employee got COVID. Is there anything like that in here? Is there anything like that we should be considering?
Yes, Mr. Poston, that's a very good question. Every carrier that I've seen has kind of loosened up because this whole COVID pandemic thing is very new for a lot of us. Basically, they're loosening up if there's even reasonable suspicion that an employee caught the COVID due to their job, then there is coverage. We've already seen some of that happening. We've seen some information on that. If they go just to the grocery store, that's not part of their job duty. They say they got it there. That's a little bit different. But if they're exposed due to their job, for example, the health department, nurses, things like that, they would have more exposure there. So long story short, yes, there is coverage there.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, any other questions of Mr. Williams? Greg, did your partner Sean want to speak, or does that conclude your remarks?
I am good there. I think Sean wants to talk about your group benefits renewal.
All right.
Yeah, it's
Sean,
on
you're up.
it's on the screen.
Sean,
Sean,
can
you may
hear us?
unmute.
Hey, we're gonna
Go ahead.
make sure that Sean is still on and unmuted. Sean,
Okay.
can you hear us?
Yep, I'm unmuted now.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you all. So just a quick overview of what we've done on the health insurance. The last 2 years, we have begun the renewal process in late January, beginning of February. Basically, y'all are with Midwest Public Risk right now. And other than them, you typically have 5 standard carriers, those being Aetna, Anthem, Cox, Humana, and United Healthcare. So this past year, or this current renewal process, we've actually gone to all of those carriers, with Aetna, Anthem, and Cox not really being competitive. But we did present options, not only the NPR renewal option, but United Healthcare and Humana as well. We've got a pretty good chunk of savings with United Healthcare, basically matching the current plans that you all have in place right now. The biggest benefit that we get from going to United Healthcare, other than the premium savings that you see there, are that their standard network includes both the Cox health system and Mercy health system. So you do not have, right now, you're currently directed to go to the Mercy health system. You'll have both those options available to your employees moving forward. And it's not a situation where they would have to choose up front whether they want Mercy or Cox. They can go back and forth in between the 2 health systems. So that was a huge benefit there. And then obviously the United Healthcare quote came in about 40,000 under your current premiums with NPR. And then when we take into account the renewal premiums, which we have from NPR, they were going to ding us about an extra 6%. Comes out to, depending on what your enrollment figures are, because they do fluctuate over the course of the year, probably anywhere from $80,000 to $90,000 in savings for the upcoming year, which would begin July 1st. And then when it comes to your ancillary renewal, that's the group life, disability, dental, and vision that are with Principal. Principal is offering basically a flat renewal there across all those coverages.
Okay, any questions from council, from Sean or Greg?
Another thing I might point out also that we're making available, in our current environment, this will be a big benefit is we'd already planned on implementing this, but we're putting into place Employee Navigator, which is a benefits admin system, essentially an online portal for your employees to get enrolled, review benefits, all that good stuff. Obviously, we're always happy to do face-to-face meetings with employees, even if we needed to do 10 meetings with 10 to 15 people in each of them. But this Employee Navigator that we're providing at no cost to the city is really going to help us get through this open enrollment process, especially given that we've got a carrier change on the health side.
Okay. Steve?
I just wanted to mention that, again, this is one of the reasons why you have a broker to work with. I think that I just want to say that Greg, it's been great working with Sean and Greg on all these different types of insurance. Connell Insurance has been there for us. They offer a lot of value-added services. We do utilize those value-added services. I know that Chandra and Mike Hunter both utilize a lot of those, some of those things you don't see on the screen. But it's been very advantageous for us this year to work hard to go back to a competitive market and actually save a lot of money for the city. So thank you to Connell Insurance for doing that. We wanted to bring this information to you tonight in advance of bringing you a contract, just so you would know and have a good explanation from both of them on all levels of our insurance. So we will work on getting the contract together, and our insurance goes through, I believe, is it July 31st, Greg?
Yes, sir. July 1st.
Yes.
July 1st.
Goes through July. So we'll bring that contract to you back for first reading in June. That's all I had, Mayor.
Okay, all right, sounds good. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you all.
Next
Thank you all
visit-
so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, the next visitor is Jerry Myrick from Barrington Springs. Jerry, are you on?
He's in the room.
Okay,
Oh,
all right.
I see you
All
there.
right, so Sam will bring Jerry up to the podium. He is apparently in the other room.
He was supposed to.
Is she over here?
No, she just left.
No, I just meant for that other room.
Okay. Well,
Down in the corner, we have somebody wanting to come in.
I got that.
Sam, can you hear us? Is Mr. Myrick in the other room?
Here she comes.
You see her? Oh,
Is Mr. Myrick on the other screen?
Is that where he is? Is he in that room?
well, I don't know.
He's in that room. He was on the agenda for Barrington
I
Springs.
don't have his computer. Oh, give me 1 second.
Okay, hang tight.
Okay.
We have a full room back in the back there for various different topics on the agenda tonight. So we're sorting through all of our guests and visitors.
Never seemed like it's farther away than it is tonight.
There we are.
All right,
Somewhere in here?
Yeah, that's good. So you can see yourself right there.
Okay.
Mr. Myrick, you're on, sir.
Well, thank you for allowing me the time to speak. Just briefly, I've lived in this area for about 11 months. We moved here, bought a home in Barrington Springs, a very nice house. In May, we had a severe thunderstorm, a lot of rain in a very short period of time. I think I've sent some photographs. Woke up the next morning and found that had several fences destroyed from the stormwater drainage runoff that runs from 19th, between 19th and 18th. It seems like it pools and collects and it runs. This problem is been known for a while. And the other part of that is surface water draining. The other part is that we also have approximately a 30-inch diameter pipe that was buried underneath the backyard. And the street collectors actually are piped into this pipe for drainage into a creek that borders my neighbor's yard. So I guess I'm here just to see if we can get the city to come out and take a look to see if we can mitigate this water drainage issue that we have and to mitigate any more damage to the properties.
Okay, Mr. Parsons, you're on. Would you like to comment? Jeremy? Jeremy, you're muted. We can't hear you if you're speaking. How about you, John? We can't. Oh, wait a minute. Here's Jeremy connecting to audio. Jeremy, are you on? Sorry, Mr. Myrick, we're getting the Public Works Director on. He shows on the screen, but he can't hear us. Or we can't hear him.
I do have Tim Octon, also from Public Works on here, and we might be able to make that work.
I'm here if you guys need me.
Okay, well, John, why don't, we're having trouble hooking up Jeremy. You heard Mr. Myrick, and I'm sure that you're familiar with the conditions that he's outlined and the pictures that he's shown. Have you all seen this, and what are your comments? Is this something we can attend to?
Yeah, so I know Tim Octon has been out there a few times and met with a few of the residents out there about this situation and the problem that's going on. The concern is that it was not built per design, and we don't have any inspections that show what was done to the. It almost looks like as each house was developed, it was kind of just pieced together on the way down there. So this is what created the problem. We don't have any records of who did what or anything, and it's not owned by the city. So I guess the request would be is this something the city would want to pursue, and it could be costly. I think my recommendation, and I think Jeremy and Tim's, would be to see what we could do and what that cost would be, and then get back to the council and get their permission to move forward.
Okay, so all of this piping, this drainage that's causing the problem is on individuals' properties, not on any kind of right of way, or it's behind fences, and it's something that we don't own and wouldn't normally control.
Yeah. So we do not own the piping that's in the ground. We don't show any record of that being built to city standards, or even in the as-built, or was it approved to be built that way? And there is some problems with where the fences lie as well. They fall too far back into there. If we were to remove the piping and let it be an open channel, then you're going to have an instance where the fences block the water, and so there may be a case where the fences have to be moved back or raised up, or a different type of fence would have to be provided to allow the water to drain properly. So there's a lot of variables in it. That's kind of where we're at, and we're waiting to dive further into this, I guess, and see what the final cost would be to fix this situation.
Okay, well, Mr. Myrick has been very much within his rights to bring that to us, and it sounds like a concern. I've seen the pictures, and it's pretty disgusting, but would you please then go ahead and look into that, Public Works, and see if there's something that can be done, and make a better determination if that's something that we can do, or if we need to check with the previous developer who is currently developing other projects in the city. And give us a direction.
Yes, sir. We will start tomorrow. We'll get with Tim again, and Jeremy and I will sit down, and we can start looking at this and what it would take to resolve the entire issue, and then get back to the council.
Okay. All right, Mr. Myrie, go ahead.
Yeah, just a point of clarity, and I appreciate, John, your comments and the willingness to at least look at this, but I do know, based on the plots and stuff, there is a drainage easement that runs along those property lines. So that's already in place.
Okay. I don't know how far back that easement goes, if it goes all the way that we would need it to go to accommodate the water all the way to the end. But again, we'll find that when we dig a little bit further into it.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Well, we will look into that, Mr. Myrie. Thank you for your patience.
All right, thank you, guys.
Yes, sir. All right, there's a Mr. Norman Johnson. Is he there? He was also from Barrington Springs. if you're there, do you have anything in addition to add? Mr. Johnson?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can and I can see you. Go ahead.
Yeah, good. Yeah, thanks for letting us come in here. And let me just add something to what Jerry already said. The issue with the water runoff that caused his damage actually had nothing to do with the drain pipes that are being discussed here. That's underground water. His damage, the damage to my yard and my neighbor's yard, that was all surface water, what we call storm water runoff. Okay, what I believe, and the documentation I sent to you guys, along with some diagrams and some photos, that begins up around McCracken. It comes down 18th Avenue, drains into the backyards of these people on 18th Avenue, about the first 6 or 7 houses. There's no fencing except for the very first house. And so that water doesn't have a way to block itself till it hits the 7th or 8th house there between 1006 and 1102 North 18th. It pools up in the back corner of that property. Once it gets to a certain height, it then travels over and under a fence at 1007 North 19th Avenue, and then turns and goes north in his property, going underneath the fence there on my property, 1103, and then just keep on going. Jerry's about 2 houses to the north of me. So this is surface runoff water. I've sent a video in that you should have on file, was taken August the 10th of 2018. It's a daytime video. It's only 20 seconds, but it'll show you an example of the water coming underneath the fence between 18th Street property onto the 19th Street property, and then turning and heading north, and then hitting those of us that are to the north of that property. Just so you know, there is a street drain between the 2 houses on 18th Avenue, 1006 and 1102. It's a street drain from 18th, goes down the backyard. It actually is visible, and there's a photo in that I sent you. It's a corrugated black tube. You can see it coming underneath the fence in the backyard between the properties on 18th Street and the property at 19th. So one suggestion I had was, is there a way to create some type of a surface drain so that if this water builds up in his backyard, it actually will go ahead and go into that same drain that the street water goes into. And from there, it will pass into the underwater drains that eventually pass on the way out to the north end of 19th Avenue. So again, this problem that we had, that Jerry's fence had, and that I've experienced numerous times over the 14 years I've lived there. This is surface water runoff, not water underground in the tubes that were apparently put in by the builders.
Okay.
Can't speak to what those tubes were, how that fit into what the public permits are and all that. But again, we have a surface issue here that definitely needs to be resolved. Because I've spent many hours fixing, repairing, and money spent repairing my backyard just because of water coming in from my neighbor and washing out my landscape. So any questions there?
Yeah, Mr. McCarthy.
Yeah, so you are correct, and I think the issue is at hand is that the piping that was put in the ground, there's no way for that surface water to enter those pipes, and also those pipes may be already overwhelmed too. So even if we had a way of getting like an area inlet out there to collect it, we have to make sure that the pipe that's underground that was installed can adequately hold that storm water and doesn't, create another issue downstream. So again, I think in the analysis, when we get out there, all those things will be determined in how to get that water in there. If we get the water in the existing pipes, is it going to be sufficient room for that storm water and things of that nature? I would think the best way to do it would to be an open channel, like it shows on the plat, and proceed that way. But again, these are all things that we need to evaluate, get with some stormwater engineers that are third party, and just go from there.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Johnson and Mr. Meyer, we will look into that, and we will be back in touch. But clearly, the council tonight can't take any action because we're we need to hear from Public Works with a report on what can be done. So, but we will get back to you, and we'll let you know.
Okay.
Any questions from council on this? Okay, thank you, gentlemen.
I think Nathan had.
Yeah.
No, whoa. Okay, I'm sorry, Nathan.
Just real quick, and and Mr. Ricard, don't let me put you on the spot if you're not ready to answer this. Are we saying that, just out of curiosity, are we saying that the drainage out there wasn't built to spec, or that we're just overwhelming the drainage that's out there?
So right now, what we're finding is that the pipe that's in the ground was not what was permitted for the development. Now, who put that in? We're still trying to figure that out. We don't know if it was built by the developer of the lots themselves or the overall subdivision. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, if there are no other comments, well, we'll move on to first reading bills. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. I'm sorry, what?
No, I'm sorry. Somebody was trying to come to join our meeting.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
I got it.
thank you.
All right. Keep in mind, everybody out there that's watching us, we've got a screen that's got about 20 little faces and names on it. And we're trying to keep track of hands that pop up and different things. So if anybody has missed, it's certainly an accident. Okay, we have next is first reading bills, and they're open for public discussion. So Mr. Smith, Bill 3150.
Thank you, Your Honor. I move that we put Bill 3150 on its first reading by title and description only, please.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made by Alderman Smith and seconded by Alderman Poston. Put Bill 3150 on its first reading by title only. All in favor? I did. Okay, thank you. I see everybody has voted. Okay, Ms. Calloway.
An ordinance amending the preliminary plat for Northtown Park, generally located south of the intersection of North Newport Drive and East Greenwich Drive, and authorizing the Director of Planning and Development to accept the dedication of the public streets and easements to the city of Ozark, Missouri, as shown on the preliminary plat, upon the applicant filing and recording a final plat that substantially conforms to the preliminary plat, and authorizing the city clerk to sign the final plat upon compliance with the terms of this ordinance.
Okay, as everyone knows, this is a bill that, well, it's a new bill, revising one that was already passed. And so first reading, I'd like to have staff comments. Mr. Smith, would you like to make any comments on that? Mr. Childers, Mr. Smith, okay.
We can give a background if you wish. Just to give everybody on the who's watching, I got to admit another person. Hold on just a second. Okay. Just to give everybody some background. Again, this is an ordinance that would be amending the conditions on a previously approved preliminary plat. There were conditions that were placed on the preliminary plat by ordinance previously. Those were approved and accepted. And now this ordinance would be considering the removal of those conditions, or at least some of those conditions.
And just to further clarify, at the last meeting, we had the attorney for Northtown Park and the applicant himself make the request that we do this. So Mr. Smith is the mayor pro tem, and I asked him if he would bring this to a head and sponsor a bill. And so he did. So we're going to reopen that for basically for discussion from staff first. So any comments from the Alderman? Well, I hear a lot of silence. I think it's important that we know how you all feel and that the public knows how you feel. Mr. Schaefer.
The city needs to stand behind its previous position. I haven't heard or seen anything compelling to even consider this up for a vote. I was surprised it appeared on the agenda. I understand that the developer wants to change the terms of the agreement, but we all must remember that those conditions were negotiated with the developer, that he had input, and I can say that from personal recollection, that he appeared before us and told us that he would accept those terms, and they were put into place unanimously. When this plat was before the Board of Aldermen, there was a lot of discussion. There were lots of citizens who were upset. The Board of Aldermen worked together very hard, spending a lot of hours to negotiate these conditions that were fair to all parties and accepted unanimously by the aldermen. To withdraw those conditions now with a little more than just a simple request from the developer and the Ozark Road District, I think would do an injustice to the system that we established, the way we participated, and the hard work we put into it. I certainly oppose the removal of the conditions and would encourage my aldermen that if you want to keep the faith of your citizens, that you need to keep those promises you make to those citizens. I would ask for that these conditions be denied and the vote to be a no.
Okay, I'm not gonna make a comment pro or con, but I would like to explain to you why it reappeared on the agenda. Because that was a decision that I made as a result of that request and as a result of the recommendation of our city attorney.
Fair enough.
This is a complicated matter. You're an attorney also, Mr. Galloway, so I know you recognize that. But it was thought that we needed to bring this up because the conditions have changed due to what the special road district, what they have changed in the process, because they have said they will not approve that second road unless the restrictions are removed. That's my understanding.
Yes, it was a request by the developer and their attorney to, and the Ozark Special Road District to bring this back forward to the board. Their formal request in writing was to make the amendments to the conditions. So that's why it was, we were just responding to that request.
Absolutely.
I understand.
And that's why I asked it to be put on the agenda, and it was at an agenda meeting when Mr. Smith was present. And as Mayor Pro Tem, as opposed to Mr. Poston, who's the planning and zoning liaison, I asked if Mr. Smith would sponsor that. So that is why it's on the agenda. All right, any other comments from Alderman? Mr. Postman?
Yes, Your Honor. I've kind of got a question and a comment. And this is directed a little bit at my colleague, Mr. Schaefer. Mr. Shirley, at the last meeting, made a comment that we shouldn't review these conditions, that we should stand by these conditions. And he made an argument similar to what you made, that he believed that us standing by these conditions showed the convictions of what we believed in, was the right thing to do. It showed that we made a right decision, we were standing by it. And I get that point, but I disagree with it to the extent that if new information is presented to me, then I think you should review your decision. I think it's more important that I get the decision right than that I get it right the first time, I guess is what my message there. So I guess I'm asking you or anybody that's in favor of these conditions, do you believe that these conditions have a meaningful impact on the situation in Grand Haven that was most concerning, which was namely residential traffic? So I guess that's kind of my question is, do you believe that these conditions have a positive impact on residential traffic?
The conditions were designed to have an impact on construction traffic. When it came to residential traffic, Grand Haven pretty much abandoned that. And I was clear, and Heather can support me on that, explaining that we can't limit or restrict residential traffic through their neighborhood. So the next turn was to the amount of construction traffic, and they're concerned about construction traffic coming through the neighborhood, which is where a lot of these conditions address the construction traffic and the closing of the gate until the first house gets its occupancy permit, again, to address construction traffic. The residential traffic was not the intent. The limit of the residential traffic was not the intent of the conditions.
Any comments from Mr.
Your Honor, I got
Postman?
one more, if I may, follow up. And just real quick, and I'm only going to ask this if he's on the phone, but is Mr. Johnson out there? May I ask a question of him?
Whoever is in the conference room where the attendees are physically, will you please ask if Mr. Steve Johnson is there and bring him to the podium? Sam, I think that would be you, but he is, he's not on Zoom, so he may be out there. So Sam, is Mr. Johnson in the attendees room?
I think Sam is now the board of all attendees. I see Sam in the hall. Should I go ask?
Yes. All right. Chandra saw her in the hall. Apparently she's not hearing us, so we're gonna go make sure she checks for Mr. Johnson. So if you all just stand by.
Or Your Honor, I'm willing to wait. If somebody else would like to go and give Mr. Johnson a chance, I can come back in a minute.
Well, I've got some comments I want to make, but I would like for everybody else to go first if you've got Any alderman want to make a
Bruce.
comment on this?
Bruce.
Oh, Bruce, I'm sorry, your hand is very small in that square. I beg your pardon. Mr. Galloway. You're muted. Unmute. There you go.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I have a question directed to Heather Alder, who represents that ward.
Okay.
A couple questions, if that'd be okay, Heather.
Yes, got it.
One, it has been some time, I have to admit, since I've traveled to that area. I've certainly traveled there when the controversy first reached our dioceses. The safety had been mentioned as an issue by the residents in seeking the condition that was obtained. And my first question is the relative size of the Grand Haven neighborhood compared to the neighborhood impacted by the other easement where apparently Special Roads is denying access. What's the difference in sizes?
Grand Haven has 144 homes, and I understand the other subdivision has 6. Is that correct? 9 homes.
I know you're not a safety expert, but it is your ward and you have viewed the subdivision. Do you agree that the safety concerns of the residents are more pressing for Grand Haven than for the 6 to 9 residents of the other subdivision?
Well, we all want everyone to be safe. We don't wish anyone, no matter where they live, to have to, to be in conditions that are unsafe. But it's obvious that there's 144 homes compared to 9. So you've got many more people, many more children in Grand Haven. So.
You heard Alderman Schaefer talking about an agreement made with the developer. Did you participate in those talks?
I did. And Mr. Johnson was very willing and accepted the conditions and was fine. He met with the Grand Haven residents, and everybody came to the decision those agreements were fair, and he thought that it was fine.
Would you agree then with Alderman Schaefer's characterization of the discussions with the neighborhood, the Grand Haven neighborhood, as involving hours and as addressing wide-ranging concerns of the neighborhood? Did he accurately describe that in his remarks today?
Yes. Yeah. We met over a 3-week period. Had several public meetings, and like Jason said, there was a lot of working together to come up with these conditions and these agreements, and Grand Haven now is satisfied. We passed a bill, the 3110 bill is in effect. The residents of Grand Haven are in agreement to it. We voted it in 6-0, so all the aldermen were in agreement. Mr. Johnson agreed to the bill. The city's met its obligation. Mr. Johnson has met every requirement, and he has every right to build his Northtown Park. We're not stopping him. The city's not stopping him. There's no reason that he can't go ahead and start his subdivision, except the other entity has put up a barrier. And so I think the conversation should be with them, not with us in the city. We have fulfilled our obligation, and we passed a bill saying that he has every right to build. And I would like to know if the special road district can keep him from using a public easement. Is that legal? Can they tell him no? That's the question I would like somebody to answer.
Well, I
Okay.
certainly can answer that question. Mr. Conway, would you want to chime in on that?
Sure.
Oh, I'm sorry, Bruce, go ahead. I mean, you're not done.
Well, I mean, I had asked Heather to answer some questions. I think that there's no question about why we're here and what agreements were made, and a significant process, a democratic process of Ozark citizens went through. And as far as the legal question for this particular factual setting, I seriously doubt that there is a case on point that deals with this exact setting. I'm certainly not a lawyer advising the city or other aldermen on how to vote, but it seems to me to be a rational decision to elect in favor of safety in light of the comments that were made today that don't seem to be disputed, and in light of the agreement, and also, you know, the troubling question of why is this on our doorstep when we agreed to everything that allowed for the development to move forward and compromise legislation. I don't think that to answer your question, Heather, I don't know what the answer would be, but I certainly understand what I feel my obligation as a city alderman is.
You mentioned you didn't know why it was on our doorstep. I think all of you aldermen, if you don't fully understand that, then let me explain again. We were going full steam ahead with this until the special road district said, we will not allow you to build that road that you need as a second access unless the restrictions are removed. And so we're bringing this up for discussion at the suggestion of our attorney. There are some potential liability issues here, and that's what we have to face. Let me explain, or let me not explain, but let me give you some details of a telephone conversation I had with Scott Deckard. I think it was Saturday, but it was over the weekend. Scott is the president of the Homeowners Association in Grand Haven, and I went to Heather before that to ask who to talk to, and she went through the channels, and because I don't know him, and I told Heather why I wanted to do that, and I'm going to tell you all why I want to do that. There is some feeling among the public, the aldermen, I don't know, that if we push this back until after the use tax election, it might not have the negative effect of upsetting people in Grand Haven. And so there was that thought, why don't we just wait until after that? And maybe those people will vote for what we want anyway, what we need anyway. And in the agenda meeting, which is the Wednesday meeting that Amanda, our city attorney, and Mayor Pro Tem, Mr. Childers, and myself have, we discussed that, and I was totally against that, because they need to know up front that use tax needs to pass on its own merits, period, and we think it should. So by holding off that vote just to try to get some votes is not the right thing to do. And I told that to Mr. Decker. And I said, so I'm going to tell you right now that staff asked this to be put back on at the request of the Special Road District and the attorney for the applicant for Northtown Park. So I said, that's exactly where we are. He made a comment, well, what about all the people in Grand Haven? And I said, well, we have to look out for the best interest of the city too. We're not ignoring Grand Haven. There are, I don't know, 400 people that live in Grand Haven, but there are 20,000 that live in the city. And it's a nasty deal. I wish we weren't having to make this decision, because I don't like it. And I know most of you don't either, but that's where we are. And anyway, I told him that, and he said, well, I'm sorry that's the case. You know, I don't agree, but I understand. So I'm not telling you he was all for I mean, he still would like for the restrictions to be there. I understand that. But he also made it very clear he understood our position. And I think some of you aldermen that are against it understand our position. So I just want to make sure we get this all out in the open, because either way we go, we're going to hear more about it. So having said that, who else has some comments? Okay, if there are no further comments about this, let me remind you, Mr. Poston, go ahead.
Was Mr. Johnson in the other room?
Let's see. Samantha, is Mr. Johnson in the other room? Boy.
Yep, we're here.
Okay, is Steve Johnson in the room?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'm here.
Oh, okay, Mr. Johnson. Yes, he is here. Mr. Poston.
So, Mr. Johnson, I had two questions.
Yes, sir.
First, can you explain to me what mobilization would look like? Is this going to be, 30 semis rolling in on day one? What is mobilization? And two, how long would it take, weather permitted and whatnot, from mobilization to the first house to be ready for permit?
Well, typically, let me start with the mobilization piece. We're going to have to do all of the dirt work, right? The infrastructure piece. That'll take a period of probably 3 months. The amount of tractors and trailers, or whatever you want to call it, to do that is limited to probably, 3, maybe 4 tops. We're talking about maybe a couple bulldozers and maybe a couple on-site dump trucks. That's really about it for the mobilization of that initial piece. So once the infrastructure starts, like I said, that's going to be a period of probably 3-4 months, given weather. The kind of weather we've got right now, it might be 10 months. But anyway, that'll be that piece. Once we actually start construction on a house, that period of time is somewhere between 3 to 5 months, given weather and some other factors. Per house, once we're talking about that, with the type of houses that we would like to build, we're talking about a very small amount of construction traffic outside of subcontractors coming in to do their stuff. As far as heavy equipment goes, and we're talking primarily ready-mix trucks on this because we're wanting to develop ICF housing. So we're talking about a footing pour, we're talking about a wall pour, and a slab pour. We're talking about 3 separate pours, and we're talking probably in the neighborhood of about 4 to 5 trucks per each of those pours for the construction of the house. Now, there will be a lumber truck that has to come in for the interior framing. There'll have to be a truck for roofing trusses, and there will be a small truck to deliver shingles. Outside of that, it'll all be small trucks. If that answers your question, sir.
Yeah, and then, so you said, if I understood you right, it's about 3 months to do, to put in your roads and stormwater?
Yeah, the infrastructure, yes, sir. About 3 months is what they're estimating.
And then, would you say 6 months, 4 months to do the first house?
Somewhere between 4 to 6 months, yeah.
So if you broke ground tomorrow, by the end of the year, first house is ready for an occupancy permit?
Yeah, more or less, yep.
Okay. All right, thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Also, if I might state a couple things that were spoken. Number one, I never did meet with the folks at Grand Haven prior to the conditions. Those were brought up kind of the 11th hour, right before the board met. And at the time, I absolutely was in favor of it. If that would help the community, absolutely, I have no problem. I had to change how I thought about that once OSRD removed their support for that road connection. And that was all done because there was no coordination between the city and OSRD. So they were caught off guard. I had no way to know that they would not be on board with any of that. I thought the relationship between the two was seamless, but again, I'm new at this game, so I apologize for that. But yes, I did agree to it. from my position at the 11th hour, when I was asked if I would support that, absolutely I would. What I don't necessarily understand is what the gate actually does for one house. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. The other thing is I would like to say, even though there's a significant amount of lots for Northtown Park, we're not talking about throwing up 20 houses at a time or 50 houses at a time. We're talking, I would estimate somewhere within the first year, year and a half, somewhere between 4 and 6 houses. I mean, it's something relatively small. So anyway, thank you for your time.
Alder, you have a question?
Yes, Mr. Johnson?
Yes,
Can you hear
ma'am.
me?
Uh-huh.
I have two questions.
Sure.
You did get a letter from the Special Road District telling you about the easement and giving you that information, right?
Yes, ma'am. I received it after the city of Ozark did. Yes. That was May of last year.
Okay, so that's why we voted for your plat approval, because you have to have that second road for that size of a subdivision, correct?
Yes, ma'am. One of the requirements from the city was that I have 2 connections on either end of the subdivision. And part of that was because the city of Ozark was concerned that Grand Haven still only had 1 and they would like to see a second entrance.
Yes, thank you. So we wouldn't have voted that plat in had we thought that you did not have a second road, a second way out. So if you thought you had the okay because you had a letter from them saying there was an easement. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. But it's also correct that I wouldn't have agreed to the conditions from the city if I knew OSRD was going to remove those because of the conditions that the city imposed on Northtown Park.
Mm-hmm. So if you didn't have a second access, the plat should never have been approved, because the letter that you got from them, is, I think their argument, as it was told to me, was all 3 of the members did not sign that. Only 1 did. So if we had known that, maybe we voted for the plat's approval under false pretenses and false information.
Well, maybe that's true, ma'am. I don't know that it's false pretenses. I think what it was the conditions that were imposed were unique to Northtown Park that had never been experienced before by any other development within the city. And it caught the Ozark Special Road District off guard. In fact, they had tried to meet with the city as early as December, trying to resolve this internally between the city and OSRD. And I think they met with some resistance from the city.
Well, I'm not aware of that because we did have a meeting with them and we discussed it at great length. So I wasn't aware that they never met. They could not meet with the city. I'm not aware of that at all. Do you think the Special Road District has the legal right to tell you can't use a public easement?
Ma'am, I have no idea. I'm not an attorney.
Well, it would be interesting if anyone would ever look into that. I've asked that question several times and no one's ever answered that for me.
Well, but I guess I would ask, I'm sorry, I guess I would ask a question as how you could be annexed into the city and zoned through the board and then be restricted access to that. I don't understand that.
I'm sorry, say that again. I didn't understand your statement.
I don't understand how Northtown Park could be zoned and annexed into the city, and then the city put conditions down to not allow access to that property to develop it.
Well, it seems like you and me have interesting questions, don't we?
Well, the other question I would have is if this situation was reversed and the county had a project, and on one side of the county was a county road, and on the other side was a city road, but the county made it a condition that all construction traffic would have to go through the city, how would the city feel about that?
No, I don't know. That isn't the circumstance.
You know, I'm caught between 2 entities here. I've met all of the requirements that have been asked.
You did. And there is a bill saying that you have the right to build your subdivision, and the city has said go.
But the only way I can do that is if I helicopter in heavy equipment.
It seems like the problem might be with the special road district because they're the ones causing the problem and telling you you can't build a second road. Can they do that?
The special road district, as well as the homeowners of Quail Meadows, have no problem with the development whatsoever. They have no problem with the construction traffic as long as it's not mandated or dictated that it goes only through their entrance. They're willing to do whatever and let the construction traffic flow as it may.
I understand that thinking, but do they have the legal right to tell you you can't build that road on public? It's a public easement.
Ma'am, I can't answer that. I guess the question would also be, does the city also have the right to deny me access after they've zoned and annexed?
I don't think we are denying your access.
Ma'am, if
We're not denying anything.
If I can't bring in materials or equipment to develop it, I'm not sure.
We're letting you, as I remember, all the heavy equipment's coming through Grand Haven in the beginning. That was the agreement because our roads were wider. So Grand Haven agreed to that, that you're to bring all the heavy equipment in the beginning through Grand Haven.
Logistically, ma'am, that is not feasible. You cannot bring all of the materials on day one to do the infrastructure as well as a completion of one house all on day one.
Well, that's not what we said. We didn't say that all the equipment would have to come day one through Grand Haven and then you couldn't. It was the heavy equipment because we understood that the roads were wider. So everyone was trying to work with everyone. And it was agreed that all the heavy equipment that it's going to take to get started would come through Grand Haven. It's the everyday traffic and the workmen that come in and out, when children are playing, used to being, in the streets because it's a quiet subdivision that Grand Haven was worried about. So you are able to bring all your heavy equipment through Grand Haven in the beginning. It's just the everyday workmen. We see that feasible going around and using the other entrance.
Well, they would have to come through Grand Haven until that second road was built.
And that was my second question. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Steve, when is the road going to be built? Do you do that in the beginning, or do you do that after the subdivision is half done or all done? When does that road get built?
No, ma'am. The condition that was one of the conditions that I had to meet was that the road. I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, go ahead.
Let me answer that question. That road is a condition of the preliminary plat, or of the plat. They will not be able to sell one single lot and start one single house until that auxiliary road is done, because they won't have met the conditions of the plat. So we're only talking about construction traffic here. That secondary road will be built before houses start, because they won't be able to sell lots if they don't. Okay?
Okay, thanks for that answer.
That's your understanding, all right, Mr. Justin or Mr. Smith? Johnson, good grief. Too many names on the screen.
Yes, yeah, Mr. Mayor, if you're speaking to me, yes. It's my understanding that the road must go in first before we can develop any of the lots.
That's ordinance. The plat won't be approved until it's done. Okay, other comments? Anybody that's got something to say, please say so. Okay, if not.
The only thing I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. The only thing I wanted to say too, just because the special roads was repeating this over and over again last time we were there, is all of the things that he was stating that need to be there for doesn't matter whether it's the roofing or the concrete or any of the construction materials, all those same materials were required to build anything on Quail Meadow Road. There's nothing that I think it's important, just because it was repeated over and over again last time, that the roads aren't wide enough going through Quail Meadow to bring those things in. And I just think that's a false statement, considering that that's how all the houses that appeared on Quail Meadow they needed all the same equipment and all the same material that all the houses would require to be built. So I just want to state that.
Okay. I want to make an explanation here, but I want to make sure everybody's done talking. Not trying to cut anybody off, okay? All right. This is a first reading bill. Typically, we would hold it over to the next session. Nobody has asked that we expedite it. I haven't really discussed that with Mr. Smith, but in the need to come to a conclusion, do you all feel there's any benefit in expediting it and voting on it tonight? I haven't counted votes. I don't know for sure. Mr. Schaefer.
Yes, I would, even though I'm opposed to the motion, I think it is important to put a close to this. And I think there's a little more information to gain from holding it over. I certainly would make a motion to expedite, to have the Board of Aldermen rule on this tonight and put this thing to rest once and for all. So I moved to expedite.
Well, I'm not going to do that yet because I have not yet opened it to public comment, and
Okay.
I apologize. So I will allow Mr. Schaefer, you can make that motion to expedite it or ask Mr. Smith to, but I failed to open this for public comment. So if there is anybody in the meeting rooms that would like to speak on this, would you please come to the podium? Mr. Smith, in the meantime, you've got your hand up.
Yes, sir. Thank you. If there is a motion, I was choosing to be silent, and I will stay that way. But if there is a motion to expedite, I do want to reserve no more than 1.5 minutes for a comment, if that's permissible.
Now say that again. If there is a motion to expedite, while we're waiting for public comment, if there is a motion to expedite it, you want to reserve time for 1.5 minutes of comment.
No more than 1.5 minutes. But if we don't expedite it, I choose to stay silent.
Okay. Is there anybody in the meeting room that would like to speak on this issue? Yes, sir. I see you coming to the screen. Would you give your name, please, to the clerk?
I will, Mr. Mayor. My name is Travis Elliott. I'm the attorney for Fortress Land Development. I spoke with you all back on May 4th.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and board members, for raising this issue tonight at our request. We appreciate it. We appreciate the time. We understand this is a hard issue. There's just a couple of points that I think have already been fleshed out, but I want to make clear. Mr. Johnson, at the time, back in November, whenever this issue was brought to the forefront, as he said, he at the last minute was willing to agree to these conditions. After that meeting, Ozark Special Road District pulled their approval of the use of the road through Quail Meadow. And that is the change condition. So as I believe Alderman Poston said, it's better to get it right than to stick by a decision that isn't based upon the current facts. And I appreciate that thought process, and we appreciate Alderman Smith sponsoring this bill. There's an ugly reality here, folks, that I want to point out. And I know the question's been raised a couple of times tonight about, is it legal for the OSRD to prohibit construction of that road? And I think it's a great point. And I think that the counterpoint to that is it legal for the city to allow initial mobilization into a development and then require a gate to be locked, prohibiting the developer from using that public access interest into a subdivision? And so the important thing here is that decision arbitrary and capricious? I mean, if anyone wants to know the question to the legal issue here, that's the question this board should ask themselves. And I would submit to you all that by providing an access through Grand Haven and providing an access through Quail Meadow, Mr. Johnson satisfied all of the requirements of the city code, the subdivision regulations, the planning and zoning code. And I would suggest to this board that the additional conditions imposed are above and beyond any other example that anyone on this board or anyone in this room can ever point to in the city of Ozark in a similar situation. And I would argue that by requiring Mr. Johnson to only use that road through initial construction mobilization and then requiring him to put up a gate, and not use it for any subsequent traffic is arbitrary and capricious. And so we appreciate Alderman Smith sponsoring the bill. The bill encapsulates the request that we articulated on May 4th. And by doing that and voting in favor of this bill, there is an even keel approach between the citizens of Quail Meadow and the citizens of Ozark, and more specifically, Grand Haven. There is going to be an equity of burden associated with any of the traffic by allowing construction traffic to go through either way, as opposed to allowing Mr. Johnson to bring initial mobilization construction traffic in, erecting a gate that he has to lock, and then not allowing him to use a city street for the development of a subdivision in the city of Ozark. And so I am respectfully requesting this board to consider supporting this bill. I understand the amount of work that went in before I was even involved in this back in the fall about establishing the initial conditions. I understand that. I'm not dismissing the merit of any of those issues, but circumstances changed immediately, giving rise to a need to revisit this issue. So it's not a matter of doubling down. It's a matter of considering the circumstances as they now exist. I mean, I think Mr. Johnson wants to be a good neighbor and a good citizen and do the right thing by the folks of the city of Ozark in developing this project, but you can't tie his hands in this situation. And so with that, I'll close. I'm happy to answer any questions. Please seriously consider supporting this bill. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Mr. Schaefer, please stay there, Mr. Elliott. Mr. Schaefer has a question.
Do cities have the right to regulate construction traffic?
They do, based upon objective, articulated bases in their subdivision regulations and their planning and zoning code. They do not have the authority to create ad hoc subjective standards that have no reasonable basis in the law or fact.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Any other comments or questions of Mr. Elliott? Mr. Galloway. You're muted. There you go.
Thank you, Mr. Elliott, for coming here. And honestly, I appreciate the position that Mr. Johnson's in. Do you feel that our initial vote for conditions that were agreed upon by Mr. Johnson were arbitrary and capricious?
Objectively speaking, yes. If Mr. Johnson would have asked me that question at the time, should you agree to those conditions, I would say no. I would advise any client to not agree to those, but I understand why he did under the circumstances. So I'm not questioning his judgment, but I mean, Mr. Johnson isn't a lawyer, just like many folks that come before this board are not lawyers. And so I think that those circumstances are different.
Yeah, I'm not being critical of Mr. Johnson's thinking. I was just thinking of our legislative body. Is your position we were arbitrary and capricious in enacting the conditions that he agreed to?
Look, so here's the real answer to that. I mean, we have tried very hard to find a path forward that is reasonable and that works for all of the involved stakeholders at the city, who are the residents, Mr. Johnson, and the OSRD. That's the reason why we're here tonight. That's the reason why we came on May 4th. That's the reason we came in February. And so I'm not here to talk about what the law or what the courts would or wouldn't do, okay? That's not our goal. Our goal is to find a path forward that works as best as possible under the circumstances for everyone. So I don't think that the answer to that question is particularly relevant, but I do think that if tested in a court of law, that those conditions, our position would be that they're arbitrary and capricious. So I don't want to not answer your question, sir.
All right, I appreciate it. My next question is, as to the special road district's role, as I understood it, they sent somebody on behalf of the road district sent a letter saying that the easement that's at question now could be used. Is it your position that by voting to restrict Mr. Johnson's access to that easement, that that was not a taking by the special road district?
I'm sorry, so the refusal to allow use of the easement for access was or wasn't a taking? Is that the question, Alderman?
Yes, by special road district.
Suffice it to say for now that I think the point is we want to work with everyone to find a common solution. I think there are issues on that side of the equation too.
Okay. You know, I appreciate it. It is a hard situation for everyone. I don't think anyone wants to be here. I do feel that certainly we as a board will accept our responsibility and vote on this. And I hope that we vote on this tonight so that this moves to resolution one way or another, whatever that means.
I understand.
All right, what's your desire, board? Mr. Smith? Yes.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You wanted an extra minute and a half. Go ahead.
Thank you. Obviously, there appears to be a move to expedite. I have no desire to expedite this personally. I don't think that's the right decision under the circumstances. I definitely do not think this is the right decision, but I will not stand in the way of anyone else that feels like it is. I do want to say just a few things, and I agree with with what Mr. Elliott said and so forth, and that if his quote is correct in the newspaper that there was a change of circumstances, if that is correct, I would agree with that too. But I want to make it very clear to the public, the change in the circumstances was Ozark Special Road District reneging on their agreement that they had made with Mr. Johnson and had provided us. Now, to say that they were ignorant and didn't have any idea what we were doing is not acceptable. Our meetings are public, meetings are posted, and I, along with other staff members and the city administrator, have different times attended OSRD meetings. They can certainly attend ours, and they can certainly pick up the phone and call, and they can certainly pay attention to our agenda as we do theirs. So I find that argument a little weak, but I would also understand that probably there's a perception that Mr. Johnson's agreement that he had with us, and I wholeheartedly believe he had an agreement. After that meeting where we voted on it and passed it, he came up and thanked me. He was very much in support of it and thought that those were really good conditions. But those changed, again, not because of us, but because OSRD reneged on their letter that I believe their board president sent. Now, if we're going to expedite, if we're going to consider a vote to expedite, we have to make a condition of that expedite, assuming, let me back up. I'm not presupposing it goes one way or the other, but a condition of expediting it tonight would have to be that OSRD has either already, one, removed their restrictions that they placed after the fact on Mr. Johnson, or two, are if we were to pass a motion to expedite, that it is contingent upon OSRD removing their restrictions. Because if we were to pass something tonight, we still have restrictions from OSRD that does not allow that second entrance. And therefore we can't do that either, right? So I'm just saying, I'm not going to place a motion to expedite it because I already stated, I feel for Mr. Johnson. I do, but I feel like the process should be that we don't expedite this one. That's just my personal opinion. I won't stand in the way, but if anybody does do a motion to expedite, I would ask that you consider that the wording of it so that we are ensured that that second entrance will be built, period. Mr. Mayor, hopefully I was less than a minute and a half.
I don't know that we can do that. We can't expedite a bill, can we? And pass it with a condition?
My question is, how do we not though? Because if OSRD doesn't remove their conditions that they placed after the fact, we're stuck with a subdivision that only has one entrance, which is not allowed. So I don't know how we do that. I mean, I'm just saying, I think that's part of the reason why I said, I think we got to think through this just a little bit. If there's a way to do it, then I'm okay with it. I'm not trying to stand in the way of it, but I just think we've got to consider if we remove what we've done, how do we know OSRD is going to remove their restrictions? And we think they will. I mean, I'm not arguing that we don't think that they will. But we certainly can't leave that hanging out there open-ended, because again, the problem with that would be we would have a subdivision with one entrance and we can't do that.
Mr. Schaefer?
I suggested the expedition, but that was before I knew Ted was opposed to it. I mean, I'm not inclined to do a motion to expedite if Mr. Smith is opposed to it. He also raises a good point about the road district. You know, I'm not inclined to put it up for a vote tonight if we're not guaranteed that the road district's going to hold up their end of the bargain, or God forbid, place additional conditions on future meetings regarding, you know, because they only want 3 conditions removed, I think, tonight. But what if they want 2 more next time? I'd like to have some assurances from the road district before the vote's taken of what their position will be upon the completion of the vote if it does fall in their favor. You know, I certainly am opposed to it, but I can't speak for my other aldermen. I can't say if we take this vote up tonight and it somehow passes, I'd like to have at least assurances from the road district they're going to allow Mr. Johnson to develop his property.
Okay, well, Mr. Smith, hang on, Mr. Ted Smith, Mr. Cameron Smith. Okay, Cameron, got a question for you. What communication have you had, or has anybody had, from the special road district that they will allow this road to be built if the restrictions are removed? Is that hearsay, or do we have some sort of substantial evidence of that?
I will defer that to Jeremy, the Public Works Director. I haven't, to see if he's had any correspondence. I have not had any correspondence with Ozark Special on this.
Okay, Mr. Parsons, do you have any correspondence or any kind of communication from OSRD that indicates that they will allow that road to be built if the restrictions are removed?
I don't think I can answer that question at this time. I know that it was discussed at the last meeting, but I don't want to in any way misinterpret what they were talking about. At that time, they felt like the conditions were going to be removed and that they were moving forward. So I don't want to speak on behalf of them, and I don't want to get it wrong. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. That's a good point. I see you, and Mr. Johnson, I'm going to get to you, but typically we're done with public comment, but that's an interesting comment that was brought up. How do we know for sure that they will do that? And so I would, Mr. Johnson, if you could shed any light on that, I would like to hear what you have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe that the city has 2 different letters, one from the attorney from that represents the USRD, one from the attorney that represents the residents of Quail Meadows, that they both state that their only objection to that and the reason for the withdrawal of support for the road was the condition of the locked gate and the verbiage of all of the construction traffic going through Quail Meadows. So I think you have that. As far as the question, and it was also stated in a public meeting, Mr. Addington stated at last meeting that if those conditions were removed, OSRD would be in favor and support the road connection. The other point I'd like to make is the second entrance, the entrance through Quail Meadows, is a condition of the plat. So if you vote on it tonight, it's still a condition of the plat. So even if OSRD did continue to withdraw their support for the road, I still couldn't move forward because it is a condition of the plat.
That's a very good point, and we should have realized that. So, part of us would like to, okay, what I understand is that some people would like to not expedite it and wait until we have assurance. But the bottom line is that subdivision will not be built without that road being built. So that's a very good point, Mr. Johnson. So I don't know if that changes any of your thoughts about this, but Mr. Smith, you've got a comment, so go for it. Ted Smith. I can't hear you. You're on mute. Ted, you're muted.
I'm sorry, my screen was telling me otherwise. Sorry about that. Mr. Johnson, I appreciate that comment because Mr. Mayor is right. And back to Mr. Schaefer, my main objection with not wanting to expedite it is I felt like there's some dots and that need to be dotted and T's crossed. And the main one was that issue with OSRD. So that was my primary concern with not expediting. If I'm not disagreeing, but if the plat is correct that we have to have the second entrance, and so if we do what we do and tonight one way or the other expedite, then that concern of mine is withdrawn.
Okay.
So with that, Mayor, I would make a motion to expedite this ordinance for its second vote by title and description only.
Do I hear a second? Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Mr. Smith seconds. There's a motion made by Alderman Schaefer, seconded by Alderman Smith to expedite this bill and vote on it tonight. All in favor of that? I want to make sure. Okay, Ms. Callaway, would you read it for the second time, please?
An ordinance amending the preliminary plat for Northtown Park, generally located south of the intersection of North Newport Drive and East Greenwich Drive, and authorizing the Director of Planning and Development to accept the dedication of the public streets and easements to the city of Ozark, Missouri, as shown on the preliminary plat. Upon the applicant filing and recording a final plat that substantially conforms to the preliminary plat, and authorizing the city clerk to sign the final plat upon compliance with the terms of this ordinance.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded, and the bill's been read. So, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Wait a minute, Mr. Poston had a question. What?
Yeah, sure. Well, since we're on second reading, I'm going to make my comments. Ms. Alder. Sorry?
You made that. You had the opportunity before. So what did you hold back?
Well, I was waiting to see if we ended up on a second reading or not. Since this is second reading, this is now open for Alderman comment.
Go for it.
I thought Mrs. Alder's comments tonight were on point. Ms. Alder came to play, and you know, I can't dispute a lot of what she said, but I can say this: in 5 years, I have had one vote that I regret. I've had a lot that I didn't like, but I've had one that I regret, and it's this one. I'm not comfortable with these conditions. I can't articulate it. I'm not going to sway anybody's vote, but I'm going to speak my mind to the folks of Grand Haven. This has been the most frustrating project I've ever worked on. We have a subdivision that's stubbed out for significantly more connections that wasn't built. It may have been built to the standards of the day, but those standards are wholly inadequate now. So you got residents in Grand Haven that opted to live there knowing that connections were coming. You've got a board of aldermen at some point that allowed that subdivision to be built. You got Mr. Johnson that bought one of the most challenging pieces of property in town and is trying to develop it. I am frustrated with every facet of this project. And I do not feel good at all about the conditions. I simply feel bad about them simply because they don't have any teeth, or not they don't have teeth, they are irrelevant to me. 3 of them are things that we better be doing anyway. If I find out that the cops are not patrolling neighborhoods, I would like to know that. If Public Works is not reviewing streets to make sure that they're functioning properly, I would like to know that. I hope this isn't something that we need to put conditions on subdivisions to do. I hope we're doing this anyway. So the only real conditions that mattered were for the street sign and the gate. I don't feel that either of those are appropriate on a public street, and that's as simple as that. So I am going to vote to remove these conditions. I understand that some won't, and I understand why you won't. But I'm going to feel good about my vote tonight and to finally be able to correct what I feel is the one mistake I've made. So that's my part, your mayor. Thank you.
Very good. All right. Any other comments or? Okay, Mr. Smith. Okay, Heather. Heather, you're muted. Okay, very good.
Okay. It is a puzzle. First of all, we annexed in a piece of property because we had a letter from the Special Road District that said there was an easement for a second access. Then we find out that they're not going to stand by the letter because all three of them didn't sign it. So in reality, the very first mistake was it should never have been annexed in. The primary plat should never have been approved because he didn't have a second access. So now they're saying, sorry, you can't have that road because we don't like the way this is playing out. We've done everything I feel correct. We have a bill that lets him build his subdivision. He can go. We have not stopped him. And he agreed to that. The people of Grand Haven are already giving up a lot. And they're already understanding that the heavy equipment has to come through Grand Haven. So they're already sacrificing that. They were glad of the other conditions, so they wouldn't have a lot of everyday traffic go through Grand Haven and putting the safety of the children at risk. Again, 144 houses compared to 9. I agree that those houses were built and heavy equipment did go on the county roads. That wasn't a problem. So I just find it, and again, no one, the question of whether the Special Road District has the legal authority to tell somebody they cannot build a road on a public easement. I just wish there was more conversation about that. The Special Road District is the one that messed up. The Special Road District is the one that is causing him not to go ahead, not the city. We haven't done anything wrong. And yet we keep being asked to make changes and to keep disappointing our citizens. We represent the citizens of Ozark. That's what we're here to do. And that's the 144 homes in Grand Haven. That's who I represent. And I don't think the Special Road District is being fair at all. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, any further comments? Mr. Smith.
Just an editorial. How can a person 100% agree with Mr. Poston and 100% agree with Ms. Alder? And yet we're in the position of here shortly probably taking a vote. That just is a testament of exactly how the situation is, and how there's not a very clear right and a very clear wrong. Because I could honestly say I agree 100% with what Mr. Poston said, and I agree 100% with what Ms. Alder said. And they're looking at it from different angles. But I do want to emphasize, I'm with Mr. Poston on the original conditions, but I'm also with Ms. Alder that we're here because OSRD screwed up. We're here because they reneged, as I said earlier. And it's a bad position to be in because we do represent the city of Ozark. And even if you were just looking at raw numbers, the citizen or the raw number of people, houses greatly exceed the other. If you were just to look at it at that perspective. And so you might say that's an obvious answer, but then there's other things that come into play. You know, Mr. Johnson being able to develop his property and property rights. And so this is just a tough situation. And what I want for any of the public to hear is that this board, and my opinion as the longest reigning at this point person on the board, is that this city and this staff and this board put a lot of consideration into decisions. Often we're unanimous. I mean, we are. And you could look at that and say, well, you know, they don't put much thought. No, we put a boatload of thought. This is by far the best board of all the years that I've served. This is by far the best board. And we don't always agree. And we try to hash through. And at the end of the day, we try to do the best thing we can, even if we disagree. And I want the public to hear that. As much as I don't want to be here, and as much as I do believe it's not anything to do with anything that's our fault, we are here. And this board and this city and this city staff are thoughtful, and we think a lot about these issues. And even if we vote one way or the other, it doesn't mean that we're not torn up. It doesn't mean that we're not conflicted. But I want everybody to know we do put a lot of thought into this. And I think that's important. And at the end of the day, that's one of the best things I think you can ask of your leaders, is that we are considering and thinking. You might not agree with everything we do, but we put a lot of thought in trying to do the best thing that we can do. And with that, I'll rest.
Thank you. One more thing before we vote. Ms. Callaway, I'm going to give you the opportunity to opine on this or to decline. Do you have any thoughts or comments that you would like to make?
I don't believe I have anything to add unless there was a specific question that was directed to me, but I would remind the board that this is an open session and anything that we would discuss would not be privileged.
Okay. All right. All right. If there are no further comments, then motion's been made and seconded to expedite this. So I guess we're ready for a roll call vote. Chandra? Oh, we need a motion to adopt. Yes.
I got that. Your Honor, I move that we adopt Bill 3150 as ordinance 20-028.
Is there a second? Is there a second to adopt?
Second.
Okay, Mr. Poston. Motion made by Alderman Smith, seconded by Alderman Poston to adopt Bill 3150 as ordinance 20-028. Roll call vote.
Alderman Alder,
I represent the citizens of Ozark and I vote no.
Alderman Flores,
No.
Alderman
I
Galloway,
didn't understand.
He said no.
No.
Alderman Galloway,
No.
Alderman Poston,
Aye.
Alderman Schaefer,
No.
Alderman Smith.
Aye.
We have four nay votes, 2 aye votes, motion fails.
Okay. We will move on, Mr. Poston, to Bill 3151.
Yes, Your Honor. I move that we place Bill 3151 on its first reading.
Oh, you're being silent, but I see 2 fingers. Okay, motion made by Alderman Poston, seconded by Alderman Smith, to Bill 3151 on its first reading. All in favor? Okay. Ms. Callaway.
Amending the municipal code of the city of Ozark, Missouri by repealing chapter 420 historic preservation in its entirety and replacing it with new language, and amending chapters 400, 405, and 407 to remove language regarding chapter 420.
Hey, any comments from staff?
But did not pass.
Mr. Smith, Cameron, do you have any comments, or Steve?
Yes, I can just kind of give you a background on this. As you all know, staff was asked to evaluate the existing chapter 420 for historical properties in the ordinance. Staff did look at and redrafted an ordinance that created an overlay district for the historic properties and removed the primary revision was removing the requirements for issuing a certificate of appropriateness or certificate of no effect. And also with doing that, we dissolved the CLG designation, the certified local government, and which would have dissolved the Historic Preservation Commission. So staff drafted that proposed ordinance. We took it to the Planning and Zoning Commission. They reviewed the ordinance. They did like the cleaned up version of that ordinance. However, the P&Z Commission discussed it, reviewed that, did recommend that we keep the CLG designation and the commission in place. With doing that, staff did revise the ordinance again, considering the Planning and Zoning Commission becoming the new Historic Preservation Commission. That is a scenario that is possible. So we drafted the revision back and presented that to the Planning and Zoning Commission, keeping the Historic Preservation Commission intact and being under the control and designating the Planning and Zoning Commission to be that commission. Also preserving the CLG designation in turn, which kept in the certificate of no appropriateness or certificate of appropriateness and certificate of no effect. So that's kind of the synopsis of that proposed ordinance. The Planning and Zoning Commission did unanimously approve the proposed ordinance that you guys have in front of you in the packet.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Smith? Mr. Poston?
I don't have a question of Mr. Smith so much as just a comment. I think this is a pretty good bill. As Mr. Smith commented, there was a lot of people that showed up at the P&Z meeting over this issue that was very concerned about dissolving OHPC without a kind of plan B. The P&Z Commission volunteered to spend a little extra time going through this and ultimately agreed to act as the OHPC. I thought that was fantastic. I was glad to see him do that. I felt this was a really good compromise between trying to address the deficiencies in OHPC and yet keeping all the good things that we had with the Preservation Commission. So well done to Mr. Smith and Ms. Callaway for writing this. And I'm thankful to the P&Z Commission for being willing to take on these additional responsibilities.
Very good. Any other comments or questions from the Alderman? Is there anybody in the public, anybody in the meeting rooms that would like to speak on this? I assume you can hear me in there, so Samantha, you might tell me if it's a yes or no. Well, I'm not aware of it. It wasn't in the beginning, so we will move on. Are there any Zoom attendees that would like to speak on this? Oh, there you go. Sam, was there anybody that wanted to speak on this? Yes.
Okay, Jim Palmer, 124 Melissa Avenue. Hopefully you guys received some of my emails. But as
Well,
far
now
as-
wait a minute, Mr. Palmer. We're talking, what bill are you here to speak on?
I'm talking right now about the Historic Commission. Because, I grew up in a small
I
town.
think you're concerned with the annexation bill. That's not what we're discussing now.
I'm talking about the Preservation Commission.
Okay, go right ahead.
Thank you. Now, I grew up in a small town, and in the Boy Scouts, we had part of our duty was to go around and help preserve some of these older places and take care of them. they had a special committee as well who made sure that things were preserved as they should for the future. You know, if we put this in the planning and zoning hands, as you just spoke of, what's to say that they're going to take this as very seriously?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I answer that?
Sure.
Yeah, I couldn't understand what you said. I don't know if it's your mask. I mean, I'm not being critical of that, but I didn't understand the last thing you said about some planning and zoning boards.
Yeah, well, the planning and zoning board in charge of the historic commission, I have some concerns about that because last time I was at a planning and zoning commission, we weren't allowed to speak. So if we have concerns about something going on historically in the city and perhaps they want to develop something or whatnot, then how are we going to be able to voice our concerns?
Well, you have an opportunity to speak if it's a first reading or a public hearing. And that's what this is tonight, is a first reading bill. That's why you have the right to speak. And at a planning and zoning meeting, you have the right to speak too. So I don't know why you denied.
It was at a first meeting at the planning and zoning, and that really angered a lot of people. So we're gonna discuss, you know, not allowing them to have control of this because we feel that a special commission like the historic.
Mr. Palmer, I know the meeting you're thinking of, and that was on the annexation, and that was a public meeting. It was posted. You had every right and reason to say anything you wanted to, and to say that you didn't have the right, I think is wrong. So
no, I'm sorry, but with all due respect, we were squashed. We were told we were not allowed to ask questions. It's just about a piece of dirt. So, you know, if maybe the courthouse was decided that, you know, it's no good anymore, it needs to be tore down, you know, the steps are too small.
No, the questions that you weren't allowed to ask were about things that weren't pertaining to the issue. I was at that meeting, and so was Mr. Poston. The public hearing was on annexation. You all had a whole bunch of questions on what was going to be built there. And I understand your desire to know that. Don't have any question at all about that or any problem with it. That just wasn't the time. And I remember the commissioner, the presiding commissioner saying that that's not what we're discussing tonight. We're discussing annexation. You will have the opportunity to discuss all of those things you want when it comes time for zoning. But we're back on planning on the historic preservation. So anyway. Go right ahead. You have anything else to say? Please proceed.
I understand that, you know, you want to make sure that what the historic commission is doing is correct and proper, and I understand that. But you know, having people who are really passionate about it, other than just people who are doing zoning, I think you might want to reconsider that and think about it. Is that okay? Okay. I mean,
well. Yes, that's, yeah. What?
Does Nathan have anything to say?
Yeah, Nathan?
Yes, sir. I was just gonna, a little more background for everybody involved. What brought this up was we have a hard time getting enough people to show up at an OHPC meeting to have a quorum, to meet the, you know, so what Mr. Palmer said about having, you know, people that are enthusiastic about historic preservation, that would be ideal. And if we could find 10 of them or 9 of them, then we probably would have never been having this discussion right now. But we couldn't. We've had trouble doing it for years. This isn't like we just, you know, struggled for a couple months and threw our hands up in the air. We've had this problem for a long, long time. And so what this does is allows us to basically keep the exact same system we have. You still have a group of people that hear historic preservation issues. It just now happens to be the P&Z as opposed to a separate board. So that's the reasoning and the logic behind this and how we got here.
I understand the reason and logic. My background is marketing. I know how to get people. I know how to get people excited. I know how to get them to get involved. And I'd be happy to help with something like that. I don't live within the city limits, so I probably couldn't. But I've learned more about this city in the past 2 weeks than probably most of you learned your whole life. But I have read every book back from the 1800s here about this city and the historic background. You guys don't know what kind of city you really have, honestly. But you have a question, sir?
Mr. Flores, do you have a question?
Well, I just think it's one thing you got to understand is that, like, I was on OHPC, and before I was a planning and zoning commissioner, and now I'm an alderman. And I think that a lot of the people that are involved in P&Z actually have gone to a lot of training and have seen a lot of things. And I think that they're very much passionate about what's going on there and preserving these older buildings in town. So I think that it's actually, I feel like it'll be going to really good hands and really good people that actually do care and are very concerned about it and actually have a lot of education on those kind of things that you wouldn't realize, And so I just think it's a relevant point to just say that when I was on planning and zoning, when we first were initially asked to take on that, and I think it's a good thing that planning and zoning is taking it on, and I think they'll do a great job with it.
Okay, well, in my perspective, with planning and zoning wasn't a good experience, so therefore, I bring this up as a topic. Otherwise, I say go for it, have a good time and preserve the history. But it's more than just buildings, it's places too. So, there's so many places like where Schoolcraft camped and traveled through, where the Civil War soldiers came through and camped outside of town before the skirmish downtown Ozark. Where the ball numbers were hung in the downtown Ozark. Ozark was used as a base to send out scouts into various parts of Arkansas and such to find, the Union soldiers were here anyway, and they were trying to find the Confederates. So, I mean, there's so much deep history. It's just not buildings. And I hope you guys understand what I'm saying. I appreciate what you're doing. I know you're working hard. I know you love the city as probably as much as I do, if not more.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Palmer. Is there anybody else in the audience that would like to speak on this topic? All right, are there any Zoom speakers? I'm sorry, Samantha, is there anybody else?
No, sir.
Okay. Are there any people that are attending by Zoom that would like to speak? Okay, if not, we'll hold this over to the next legislative session, which will be the first meeting in June. All right, Mr. Galloway, Bill 3152. Can you hear me, Mr. Galloway?
I'm here.
Okay.
I move that we place bill number 3152 on its first reading by title only.
Second.
All right, motion made by Alderman Galloway, seconded by Alderman Poston to put bill 3152 on its first reading. All in favor? All right, Ms. Galloway.
An ordinance of the City of Ozark, Missouri, authorizing the city to enter into a contract with Leo Jernigan Construction Company Incorporated for professional services.
Okay, Mr. Parsons or Mr. McCart, any comments?
Yeah, can you all hear me just fine?
Just fine.
All right. I want to circle back and thank John for taking those first issues with Barrington Springs. I apologize for the technical difficulties, but he did a great job with it, and we look forward to bringing that to you at a breakfast meeting to discuss those issues. Regarding the Leo Jernigan paving bid, this is our 2020 paving package that went out for bid in the month of April. We received 3 bids back, one from Blevins Asphalt, one from APAC, and one from Leo Jernigan. I'm going to try to share a screen here real quick, Sam. And I just want to show everyone that the city projected about $1.1 million. That's this number right here, lower on the highlighted section. Both APEC and Blevins came in right at $1.1 million. Jernigan, as I said to a few of you, they've really sharpened their pencil on this packet. We feel like for the amount of work that we're asking or that we put out in our bid for this packet, $749,000 and a little, roughly $750 actually, is just an amazing bid package, amazing contract price. And I've got one more thing while I'm still sharing this data with you. I went back and did a historical analysis of previous paving bids, and I only went back to 2015 because prior to that, we were doing very small paving projects. We have greatly increased the size of our paving projects from about 2016 on, and that's because of the commitments that were made by the Board of Aldermen as well as the transportation sales tax. And the two highlighted numbers that you see under the 2020 unit prices, we received bids back for 75 cents a square foot. And if you follow that line over to the right, you can see that that price is extremely competitive. Actually, it's the lowest we've seen. So staff feels very confident that this bid packet was put together well. It addresses some of our primary issues that were put together in our 5-year plan. And we feel like we're going to get more work done this year as a part of the bids that we received for a really wonderful price. So we're asking that we go ahead and approve the bid packet. And we're also asking, in order to get this moving forward in the 2020 paving season, we respectfully ask that you expedite this bill as well.
Okay, any comments from the Alderman? Any comments from the audience anywhere? Okay, Mr. Galloway?
Hey, Jeremy, can you stop sharing the document? We need to be able to see everybody on the screen. Hang on one second, Mr. Mayor. I just want to make sure we have to see and hear everybody.
No, I didn't find that. I would have, but are you working on that, Jeremy?
Yeah. One second.
Pull the plug.
I know it. It's not giving me the option. I don't know.
Samantha's coming. I think she can override your document.
Yeah, you just say no.
Oh, here we
Okay,
go.
there we
Hold
go.
on,
We're
hold
back
on.
on.
Here we go.
Hey.
Oh, we did it again.
All right, Mr. Galloway.
I think we stopped it at the same time.
Your Honor, I move that we expedite bill number 3152.
Does Nathan have a question?
Second.
Nathan, you have Alderman Poston, you have a question or?
I do, yes.
Oh,
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Well, it was at last minute and I didn't see you.
We didn't have it all on the screen there.
I
so
know.
sorry.
So I've talked to Mr. Parsons about some of this, but I had a couple of questions for Ms. Calloway. Ms. Calloway, how do you feel about the damages and late fees and penalties that are outlined in here? Are we covered? I feel like we know that we're heading into a period of little economic uncertainty here. When I talked to Mr. Parsons the other day, kind of the term I used was, we can't make mistakes for a while. We need to play some air-free ball. We don't have the money to be off. So do we have the conditions in this contract to cover damages and whatnot if weather doesn't cooperate, if something takes longer, costs more, are we good?
The contract follows our standard contract language, so it does include the insurance requirement. The insurance requirement is updated every year pursuant to the sovereign immunity limits that are set by state law. So we are covered for the full sovereign immunity limits. So the contractor would have to provide that insurance. That's located on page 5 of the beginning on page 5 of the contract. So to answer that question, yes, we are covered in that aspect. Did you have other specific questions?
Well, more specifically, I want to know that nothing's going to cost more than we've outlined, that nothing is going, and then if anything runs late, goes long, that it's going to be on the contractor, not on the city.
Jeremy,
Can I take? Alderman Poston, this contract is designed to be a not to exceed, and additionally, it's designed as a base bid with 3 alternatives, or alternates in this case, A, B, and C. This allows staff to reassess after the base bid package is completed, because occasionally we do run into undergrading issues, structural issues. This allows staff to collaborate with our legal department as well as our finance department to give them an accurate reflection of where we're at that time and make sure that we are playing error-free ball, or just assess the situation prior to releasing them on those alternates.
So if numbers start to run up, if we run into an unanticipated problem or something, are we saying that maybe one of these projects get dropped so that we make sure we hit our 750 mark?
We're saying we work with the contractor to ensure that there are no overruns. If anything goes over the 750 mark, we'll have to come back to the Board of Aldermen.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, Mr. Galloway has made the motion that we adopt Bill 3152 as ordinance 20028, but I don't have a second yet.
Second.
Mr. Schaefer, second. All right, roll call vote, please. Oh, wait a second. It's a new bill, never mind. Well, yeah, still a roll call vote. Go ahead, Chandra.
Your Honor, point of order, did we read this, put this on a second reading?
We haven't read it yet.
Well, we haven't read it. Okay, he made the motion to do that. You're right. All right, Ms. Calloway, would you please read it for the second time?
I don't know that there was a second to the motion to.
All right, Alderman Galloway moved to expedite it. Alderman Schaefer moved to, or seconded it. And
Okay.
so, to expedite it. So all in favor, raise your hand or say aye, and Ms. Calloway will read it. Thank you. It's been a long meeting, and we're half done. Go ahead, Ms. Calloway.
An ordinance of the City of Ozark, Missouri, authorizing the city to enter into a contract with Leo Jernigan Construction Company Incorporated for professional services.
Okay, now, a motion to adopt.
Your Honor, I move that we enact bill number 3152 as ordinance number 20-028.
Second by Alderman Smith.
Second.
All right, roll call vote, please.
Alderman Alder,
Aye.
Alderman Flores,
Aye.
Alderman Galloway,
Aye.
Alderman Poston,
Aye.
Alderman Schaefer,
Aye.
Alderman Smith.
Aye.
We have 6 aye votes, motion carries.
Okay, Mr. Smith, I need to leave the room for a minute. Would you take over and let Mr. Galloway do 3153, please?
Yeah, absolutely, Your Honor. Mr. Galloway.
Yes, Your Honor. I move that we place bill number 3153 on its first reading by title only.
Second.
All those in favor? Ms. Calloway.
An ordinance of the City of Ozark, Missouri, authorizing the city to enter into an intergovernmental agreement with Christian County for Christian County's cost share program.
Okay, Mr. Childers, do you have staff comments?
Actually, I think Mr. Parsons is going to do the same thing here. Jeremy, are you going to explain this as well?
Yes. This is also fairly typical to bring this to you in the month of April or May. This is a cost share program that is part of Christian County's general revenue sales tax cost share. They allocate a certain portion of their general revenue to each one of the municipalities and or special road districts within the county. We submit certain projects to them. In this case, we submitted the Cali Springs Residential Connector Street, which is Trevor Trail. We submitted that to them for their review. They recognized it as a street that was in need of repair, and then they awarded the cost share. The cost share is a little bit later than it has been in the past few years by just a few weeks, but that was mainly a result of the COVID and the lack of getting some boards together. But everything's on track now, and this is the agreement that they presented to us, and staff would recommend that you please approve this and expedite this as well.
All right,
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, we are at board comments. Back to you, sir.
All righty, thank you for that, Mr. Smith. Any comments? Any questions of Mr. Parson? All right. If If not, any comments from the public? All right, do I hear a motion, Mr. Galloway?
Your Honor, I move that we expedite bill number 3153.
All right, is there a second?
I think.
Second.
Second by RJ, okay. All in favor? All right, Ms. Galloway?
An ordinance of the City of Ozark, Missouri, authorizing the city to enter into an intergovernmental agreement with Christian County for Christian County's cost share program.
All right, any further comments? All right, Mr. Galloway?
I move that we enact bill number 3153 as ordinance number 20-029.
Second.
Seconded by Alderman Flores. All right, all in favor? I'm sorry. Motion's been made by Alderman Galloway, seconded by Alderman Flores to enact bill 3153 as ordinance 20-029. Roll call vote, please.
Alderman Alder,
Aye.
Alderman Flores,
Aye.
Alderman Galloway,
Aye.
Alderman Poston,
Aye.
Alderman Schaefer,
Aye.
Alderman Smith.
Aye.
We have 6 aye votes, motion carries.
Okay, Mr. Galloway.
Your Honor, I move that we place bill number 3154 on its first reading by title only.
Is there a second? Alderman Poston. Motion made by Alderman Galloway, seconded by Alderman Poston to put bill 3154 on its first reading. All in favor? All right, Ms. Galloway.
An ordinance authorizing the mayor to grant an easement to the Empire District Electric Company.
All right, Mr. Childers.
Yes, you may remember that the city of Ozark already approved and worked with the people that are leasing the US baseball park. They leased the park from the city of Ozark, and so we entered into an agreement with them by where we allowed them to sublease to AT&T to put a new tower behind the baseball park. In going through that process, the Public Works Department was contacted, and it was found that there was an additional easement that was needed in order to be able to run the electric power from the existing overhead power line to the tower sitting behind the ballpark. So that's really all this is that we've already given approval for the tower, but now we are needing to give approval for the easement that's going to allow for the electricity to be run to the tower. Sorry that wasn't done before, but that wasn't submitted to us, so we didn't realize that was something that was needed. So.
Okay, any further questions? Yes, Mr. Poston, then Mr. Flores.
I'm just a quick one, and Steve, this is only, my question is, do you remember the contract we have with US Baseball for the park? Do you know how much longer we have left on that contract?
Yeah, actually, I'm glad you asked, but we've been communicating with US Baseball about that lease. I sent an email to them reminding them that that was coming up in August of this year. So you will be seeing a request to revise that lease on your next meeting. So, but their lease is coming up in August.
Thank you. That was all I had.
Okay. Mr. Flores, I think.
Yes, Mr. Flores.
Yeah, the question I was going to ask is, did we ever get any reassurances that they were going to put their electrical underground over to that transformer, and that's a ground transformer? Or are they planning on running overhead lines from?
I think Mr. McCart can answer that question. John, that's going to be run down and it's going to be trenched over to the new tower. Isn't that correct?
Yes. Yeah, sorry, I was getting off mute, but yes, that's everything that I've seen in the legal description. That's what I took from it that was provided to me.
And
Gotcha.
so that'll be underground and not overground or overhead, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
The only concern I have is normally on these, they will specify whether it's overhead or underground, and they haven't done either one. So on what they've submitted to us, there's nothing that states that it's one way or the other. So the only thing I'd like to see is just making sure that before we approve it, that we have something there that states that they will actually put an underground. Because as of right now, if I was to interpret this, I would think that this would be overhead to a transformer on a pole next to the tower. And then from there, they'll take it down underneath and feed the tower from there.
So do you want to hold off until we know for sure?
It would make me feel more comfortable because where that is, and I know they have overhead lines in the backyards there. And for me, what it looks like is they're going to plan to come over from pole, but normally they'll state that it's going to have like a UGE there, underground electrical or overhead electrical, and it doesn't state either way. So there's nothing really that'll tell you that I see anyway that really designates it as one or the other.
Okay.
If I could, this is Jeremy.
Go ahead, Jeremy.
RJ, I think that's a great point. I think this was, as Steve said, a last-minute easement and exhibit that Liberty put together, and I think we could get them to turn around that, just specify on there and give us a note that does say underground electric. I think they kind of rushed to get this to us. I know they did. So.
No
Are
problem.
they asking to expedite this tonight, Jeremy or John?
Initially, they had asked that we expedite it, but I think in light of just this, making sure that this is underground, I think it's within reason just to wait until June 1st so we can get with Liberty and make sure that we're giving them the easement we want them to have. So.
Okay, yeah, I would hate to assume that it is going to be underground and it's not, if it's not specifically noted on the drawing, as Alderman Flores mentioned.
Mr. Picard?
Yes, back when this was originally started, I remember talking with Mr. Eric Ponder at Liberty Electric about them trenching that. But, going back to what Jeremy said, I think it's better to double check, and Mr. Flores as well, to check that. But unless something's changed, that was their intention, is to trench that pavement back there and get underground in.
All right, then we'll hold this bill over until.
I think Mr. Galloway has it.
Oh, wait a minute. Okay. Bruce, you need to be louder. Go ahead.
Okay, wouldn't we just want to table till the first part of June and then expedite at that meeting? Would that not be the best approach?
Well, I don't know that we have to do a first reading in June to add a word. Ms. Callaway, what are your thoughts?
Presently, the easement language, which is in the legal document that would be recorded, it gives them pretty wide authority to put any sort of telecommunication infrastructure on that property, including aerial cables. So you would be making a substantive amendment to the easement document if you remove that.
Okay, good point. Then Mr. Flores, I guess what we need to have from you is a motion to amend this to be underground and bring it back to first meeting in June. Bring it back as a first reading bill in June, we can expedite it then. So all you need is a motion to amend this for underground, and we'll get a second.
Okay, I make a motion to amend Bill 3154 to show that it states that that's an underground electrical line. And that we,
all right, we've got Alderman Smith is the second. All in favor of that amendment? Okay. All right, then it passes. We will bring this back in the 1st of June as a first reading bill, making sure that it's underground. That's a good point, Mr. Flores. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Galloway, 3155.
Your Honor, I move we place bill number 3155 on its first reading by title only.
Your second? Motion made by Alderman Galloway, seconded by Alderman Smith to put bill 3155 on its first reading. All in favor? All right. Ms. Galloway.
An ordinance of the City of Ozark, Missouri, authorizing the city to enter into a contract with Oklahoma Evans Enterprises Incorporated for repair and maintenance of certain public works equipment.
All right, Mr. McCarter or Mr. Parsons, who's going to take that?
I can take this real quick. It's this is a contract that recently came before you, I think just a year ago. We've made a couple changes. We went out for bid again by working with our chief wastewater operator. They went out for bid again. They received 2 bids. They decided to go with Evans Enterprises. This is, just so you all know is for specialized repair and maintenance of electrical and mechanical equipment, specifically though that equipment that's directly related to our lift stations. So having 19 lift stations and you all knowing the topography and the various terrains that we've got these lift stations located in, and you also know the weather patterns that we've had recently with the increased inflow. It is very important. These are kind of our cavalry, if you will. These are the guys that we call in to make sure that we can get these motors rebuilt, and we have them in queue in case anything does lock up or seize up or need repair or rebuilt. So we would ask that we get the Evans Enterprises under contract, and we would respectfully ask that we expedite this as well, because the contract is set to run out. I believe Amanda may know for sure, but we'd ask that you expedite this.
Yes, your present contract is actually already expired.
It is already.
Yes, the original contract was drafted to have 3 renewals and it expired, so we couldn't renew it, which is why the bid was sent out.
Okay, and Mr. Parsons has indicated that he would like to have this expedited. So Mr. Galloway, do I hear a motion for second reading?
I move that we expedite bill number 3155.
Is there a motion or a second to that? Motion made by Alderman Galloway, seconded by Alderman Smith to put bill 3155 on its second reading. All in favor? All right, Ms. Galloway.
An ordinance of the City of Ozark, Missouri, authorizing the city to enter into a contract with Oklahoma Evans Enterprises Incorporated for repair and maintenance of certain public works equipment.
Okay, Mr. Galloway.
Your Honor, I move that we enact bill number 3155 as ordinance number 20-030.
Yes.
Do I hear a second? Do I see a second? Okay. Motion made by Alderman Galloway, seconded by Alderman Smith to adopt bill 3155 as ordinance 20-030. Roll call vote, please.
Alderman Alder,
Aye.
Alderman Flores,
Aye.
Alderman Galloway,
Aye.
Alderman Poston,
Aye.
Alderman Schaefer,
Aye.
Alderman Smith.
Aye.
We have 6 aye votes, motion carries.
Okay, resolutions 1946, Mr. Poston.
Your Honor, I move that we read resolution 1946.
Motion made by Alderman Poston, seconded by Alderman Smith to read resolution 1946. All in favor? All right, Ms. Galloway.
A resolution by the Board of Aldermen of the City of Ozark, Missouri, approving 3 reappointments and 2 new appointments to the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Okay, any questions about these? We had several expired, and one, one person, Charlie Powell, is resigning, but we won't deal with that till next month. So, yes, Mr. Poston, you had a question or comment?
Yeah, Mr. Smith, were we going to make an effort to, Mr. Cameron Smith, not the other Mr. Smith, were we going to make an effort to get the commissioners on their term expiring on the same month, or was that just wishful thinking when we were talked about that?
I believe the way these are set up, there's probably 3 expire each year, but I believe they are the same month. There's a couple that's kind of had taken over some terms. I don't have the best answer for that. It'd be ideal if they did all expire at the same time for like 3 commissioners at a time.
Ms. Galloway, I'm not asking to promote suggesting we do that tonight, but is that something we can look into to somehow get these terms to align so that we don't expire just randomly throughout the year?
Yes, we can look at doing that. Some of the terms may look odd on this specific resolution because some people are being appointed to fill unexpired terms. And once that term ends, they will be reappointed. And so hopefully we can clean some of that up when they are reappointed.
Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
Your Honor, I move that we adopt resolution 1946.
Motion made by Alderman Poston, seconded by Alderman Smith to adopt bill 1946. Roll call vote, please. I don't know if we need to do that for resolution.
Okay. We don't need to.
We don't need to do that for resolution. Okay, just all in favor? All right, it passed. Those are good men. I want to say one thing. We have a very strong planning and zoning board, and I was sorry for RJ Forrest to leave it because he was a great addition. I'm glad to have him here, but we've got two very good people to take over, and I want to tell you, they came from the Historic Preservation Commission, so they've had some training. So for all those out there, you need to know that we're taking the training seriously. So, all right, second reading bills. Mr. Poston, 3-1.
Your Honor, I move that we place Bill 3136 on its second reading.
Okay, motion made by Alderman Poston and seconded by Alderman Smith to put Bill 3136 on its second reading. All in favor? Okay, Ms. Callaway.
An ordinance amending the corporate boundaries of the city of Ozark, Missouri by annexing certain real property generally known as the 2000 through 3170 block located on the west side of South 6th Avenue and the 3100 block located on the east side of South Selmore Road.
All right, this is a second reading bill, so there's no public comment, but I would like to make a comment to the public, and then we'll have alderman comments. I know that everybody in the waiting room or the meeting rooms, because there's several in there that are interested in this annexation issue. They submitted petitions against this. We just received them Friday. And I want to, I don't know if.
Cameron's going to explain it too.
Okay, who does?
Cameron can explain.
All right, Cameron, I'll let you take this. Unless you want me to go ahead, okay, well.
Yes.
My understanding, I have the document in front of me. There were two petitions, and I don't know if whoever passed the petitions inquired about this. Ms. Callaway, are you good? You need to say something?
I just believe that staff is prepared to explain the petitions and they've done the calculations, and that might be. Cameron has the explanation, but I can also provide an explanation.
Well, I offered and he didn't take me up, so I wasn't sure.
No, I did.
Explain.
Nope.
Draw straws.
Go, Cameron, you're on.
All right. So yes, as you noted, staff did receive two petitions Friday afternoon, and they did meet the qualifications for timeframes of getting those submitted to the city. In looking at the annexation, we refer to RSMO State Statute Section 71.12. That statute notes that at least 5% of the qualified voters of the city are what you take into consideration for these petitions. The city currently has 11,462 registered voters. So the petition to qualify for a valid petition would need at least 573 signatures. Of the two petitions, one petition was a petition of opposition of the annexation. The other petition was a petition for approval with stipulations or conditions on the approval. In staff's reviewing of those two petitions, the petition for the opposition, there was a total of 127 signatures. Of those 127 signatures, only 15 fell within the city limits of Ozark, so it did not meet the threshold of the 573 signatures. Of the petition for approval with the stipulations, there was 129 signatures, and only 11 of those signatures were within the city limits of Ozark. So that petition did not qualify as well. So in looking at that in the calculations, these two petitions did not qualify for consideration for the opposition of the annexation.
Okay. And of course, all we're dealing with tonight is annexation, period. So any comments from the Board of Aldermen? I see Mr. Stinger, the applicant, is on. So if there are board comments or questions, now's the time. Okay, Mr. Galloway.
Yes. I would first note that I take a pretty broad view of the annexation statute, that we're to consider what's reasonable, necessary, and proper to the development of City of Ozark. And I think that's pretty broad encompassing. But I would like an opportunity, I'd like the opportunity to ask some questions of Stephanie Stinger, if that would be appropriate. Your Honor.
Right ahead, she's on the screen as well.
Stephanie, or can I call you Stephanie? I guess.
Sure.
Okay.
Yes.
Stephanie, there are a lot of different considerations for this board to consider. And one of those is where we would like to see growth in the town as a matter of policy. Your development is in what section of town, proposed development?
Oh, you're the south part of town.
Okay. And what about that area do you think, what about that area or that part of our region do you think would be proper for the development of Ozark? What characteristics does it have?
Well, the first thing is we've owned this property for quite a long time. And while we've had ownership of it, you all have invested in a sanitary sewer system that runs right through the valley. So you have an investment in a system that isn't being used and contributed to by the land that it's adjacent to. So development of that land makes sense for the city to use improvements that they've already invested in. Another thing is, I mean, we bought the property because we believe the south side is the way that Ozark should grow, staying independent as Ozark. And I think that people who live on the south side of town would shop in Ozark. They're not going to travel through Ozark to go north any farther north. So I think it's a good thing for Ozark to have people that are on the side of town living and shopping and using the improvements that they've invested in, that the city's already invested in.
Stephanie, as you know, our country and our region is facing a time of serious economic retraction. Can you give us an idea of the scope of what might occur if we annex that area in terms of jobs for people who are living in this area?
Well, we would intend to develop it with single family homes mostly. And as of now, there's a shortage of homes in Southwest Missouri. And as of now, not seeing a contraction in development or sales of homes. And I think there are two reasons: basic demand and supply. There's not enough supply. But secondly, the interest rates are so low. And third, in our area, we have a diverse workplace. And so we have not seen people doing their jobs to the same extent that people in other places have. But as we develop and construct these neighborhoods, we use all local contractors, we use local suppliers, we use local workers. So we would also contribute in that way.
I wanted to draw your attention to some critical comments that were made by members of the public. And I will add that in particular, I invited a more wide-ranging comments from the public than maybe some people think was appropriate. but I'd still like you to handle it. In that land that you own, is there a natural feature there that, like a, oh, I can't think of the term right now, not a land bridge. Can you help me out there? What are the plans for that natural feature if it's annexed?
Yeah. Well, the reason why we bought the property is how beautiful it is. And there is a natural bridge. That's what we call it. I don't know what the technical term is, but there's a natural bridge there. We would protect that. There's a large portion of the property in the floodplain. And so, I mean, this is just a guess, but I would say at least 50 acres. And all of that would be community area for people who lived in our neighborhoods. And the environmentally sensitive areas are in those community areas. They're not in the places that would be developed. Now, some of the stuff is outside of the area that's being annexed, but all of those features are within the area that would stay community property for the neighborhood.
I think you said a couple things there. I think you were talking in terms of wetlands and floodplain, but you did say there's a natural bridge there. What assurances can the public have that it would be protected?
I don't really know how to answer that other than I can't see my brother, but I know he's in another one of these boxes. He has been, can I throw that to him?
Go ahead.
So the natural bridge that's on the south portion of the property that's proposed to be annexed, it's actually going to be featured in the development with its own community area around it where people can even have events there. They can have picnics there. One of our land planners even said he could see somebody holding weddings there. It's so beautiful. So we will feature that along with the 50 acres of green space, along with the 6,400 lineal feet of walking trails. These are all things that we can attribute to that property that we bought 20 years ago. There's natural springs, there's 3-acre lakes. It's just a beautiful piece of property that I think can be developed in the right way so the people of Ozark and South Ozark can enjoy it.
Let me ask you a question, Mr. Stenger. You say if it's developed in the right way. For the benefit of those people that may not know about your company and projects that you have developed, give us a brief background, if you can do that briefly. You've been doing it a long time.
So our family's been in the residential subdivision business for about 40 years. And we take pride in all the developments that we do. We start off with, a piece of property. We have the vision of it. And then we take it, work with the cities, take it through the steps necessary. And we create not just neighborhoods, but we create communities that we feel proud of. Some are gated, some are not. We have strong homeowners associations that we run until the last lots are sold. We always inspect our properties, make sure people are following the covenants. And that's one of the big selling points that we've had throughout the years is that what we say we're going to do, and we enforce the covenants, and people know that their values will stay.
All right, any other comments? Mr. Galloway.
And I guess I'll address it to Ms. Stinger. That area, and again, I'm speaking to the concerns that were raised, the floodplain, the springs, and so on. I take it what we're talking about is an area that is rural in character and worth preserving.
Yes.
Okay, and so drawing to that, a concern that was raised by one of the residents by the email of basically light pollution, the inability to see night skies and so on. And that is a feature of rural living, and that is something that is unique to Southern Ozark as opposed to North Ozark, which is very close to Springfield City Lights. Has there been any thought put to that in terms of you're putting in single family homes? It's a lot of lights, a lot of area being lit up at night. What are your thoughts about that?
We have done neighborhoods in the past where we.
Are you asking?
Who are you asking?
Whoever, I guess, Ms. Stinger or.
Go ahead, Stephanie.
Okay. Either one.
Okay. We agree with you, and we want to have first of all, you have to have safety. So you need the street lights for people for safety, but you also want to have as little light pollution as possible. We have tried to do that in our recent subdivisions and have been able to work with utility companies to be able to have shorter street lights and lower level light. We contacted Electric today to ask them what they have available, and they don't have that product available right now. So I can't commit to what will be available, but I can absolutely commit to we want to do what we can with what's available through the electrical providers that Ozark has. We will support that and would agree to that through zoning or platting. But as of today, we couldn't even get an answer as to what would be available for us to use that Ozark Electric would agree to.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I guess, that's the concern maybe of the citizens there is, they hear the term commitment, and then what they say is, well, how do we know that will come to fruition? I mean, you're making the case for Southern development, and you're making the case that you're the appropriate developer, that you'll actually open up the natural bridge to the public, which is now private land. And you're saying that most of the habitat, the area that would be affected would be floodplain and not developed. I guess, the question is on annexation, which is about the last time the Board of Aldermen get to have any kind of say about anything under our present ordinances and statutes. It's trying to find to assure the public that the commitment will be honored. I mean, I guess I would throw this towards Steve. I mean, are there ways that on this annexation that it doesn't sound like this developer has any problems with anything that I'm pointing out? Are there ways that once we enact annexation, that the Board of Aldermen can be sure that it doesn't get sold to some other developer who has completely different ideas and goes crazy?
Can I just clarify that I
Go ahead, Stephanie.
in Bruce, and I'm sorry, this Alderman Galloway, when you restated, I'm sorry, I did not say that it would be open to the public. I said it would be community property for the people who live in that subdivision. And there will be a lot of the, I mean, it's a large area, but I'm not committed. I don't want that to be misunderstood.
Okay.
Not that that couldn't be possible, but as of now, the idea is, yeah.
What your commitment is, you'll preserve it and people will be able to access it in the community area, is I think what you're saying, that live in your HOA, part of your HOA.
Correct. And also, we read in other places in the platting conditions about this down, well, they call it downlighting. So it's focused down instead of this is, 20 years ago, but they were talking about downlighting. So I think that the platting is a place where you could put conditions like wood on a road, or, I think that's possible.
Yeah, I think that that's where I was directing the question to Steve, because I think what we learned, Stephanie, from the ongoing, well, you just heard, you would have listened maybe to the Grand Haven debate. Part of the issue there was once annexation was approved, Board of Aldermen lost control, and then we came into a position where all the developer has to do is follow the outlines of our ordinance, which doesn't frankly deal with light pollution. And there's nothing that can be done. And I guess that's what I was directing the question to Mr. Childers about, because I would like to see on the front end, something.
Well, I think that our rules are established by the state statute, and, it's the state of Missouri that really directs us in how we're allowed to annex and how we're allowed to zone. And just recently, we realized that in the past, the city of Ozark had combined those two processes, whereby previously the city of Ozark would evaluate an annexation, but required that the zoning be identified on that annexation at the same time. We've recently modified that ordinance to where those are two separate processes now. That doesn't mean that the developer can't run those two ordinances at the same time or simultaneously to the Planning and Zoning Commission or to the Board of Aldermen, but they're each independent when making a decision about what you're doing. So there are certain findings of facts or certain evaluations you make when you're annexing, primarily whether or not that annexation fits into the goals and objectives of your comprehensive plan. Is that an area that you want to bring into the corporate limits of the city of Ozark? And also, can that area be serviced with public services? I don't want to just say infrastructure, because I think that's been part of the discussion lately is, sure, we might be able to give it water and sewer, but what about the street impact? What about the public safety impact on our police department, parks, things like that? So I think that's going to be the conversations that we have upcoming. Certainly on Thursday at our breakfast meeting, we'll be talking a lot about that. But then when you get to the zoning, that's really where the rubber meets the road. Once you've made your decision to bring in a piece of property, you're committing to bring that into the corporate limits of the city of Ozark and service it. The real design requirements go into the zoning. So I think that what we're seeing now as staff is that there are certain desires of the Board of Aldermen and our Planning and Zoning Commission that they want to have possibly some more specific design guidelines put on the zoning process, because that's really where it's appropriately at. So if it's dark sky, if it's downlighting, if it's a certain percentage of open space, not necessarily parkland, as Stephanie was pointing out, but open space or common area that's dedicated to an HOA or something like that, for the neighborhood, and trails and such, that's where that really needs to be. So we're going to talk a lot more about that, but that's really how it lays out.
Well, kind of where I'm at is the developer is developing an area that makes sense from the point of view that we have a wastewater treatment plant there already that's adjacent to. It's on the southern side is what we've talked about in terms of developing. A lot of the habitat issue is addressed by the fact that it's in the floodplain, and the natural bridge, which I would have to believe is true, the developer has an interest in preserving, would actually even be opened up to more members of the public than it would be right now. But light pollution is something that is nothing in our ordinances. It's something that in the southern side of town is very sensitive. And to me, I would really like to understand, maybe from further discussions, to where we're assured that if other aldermen agree with me, that is, that we have something that is in effect, that we understand there will be mitigation here that's significant. So I don't know if that takes the form of a condition or not, but it seems to me like, again, we're just in this position. We can trust the developer, which actually this developer has a long history of solid developments. He's not the first developer to be in Ozark that way, including the person that we had here earlier today. It's not that, but things change, people change, developers change, sell out, things don't go the way they plan. I mean, is there any objection from the Stingers to have to at least have some discussions where we're assured that a lot of these concerns that were raised by the citizens are actually going to be put into the development? And again, the reason why I say this is, as soon as we vote for annexation, we're done. We don't have any way of enforcing anything.
I would think that would be addressed at the zoning and plating stages.
Yeah,
the conditions.
except that at plating, we're done. I mean, we've already been through this. We'd like to change our ordinances. We're going to be talking about it. That's what Steve was concerned about. But I mean, especially in the area where we don't have ordinances, which was light pollution.
Would you be tabling it to a certain date?
Yeah, not very long either. Just long enough for some discussions to be had with staff, and I'm talking like June, the next meeting in June. If that would be acceptable to you.
Yes, that'd be acceptable to us. We support the dark skies, and it's to our advantage to see what is specifically that you're asking. So yeah, I mean, if you're talking about a couple-week delay, then I think if that makes the Board of Aldermen more comfortable, then we're willing to that.
Would that make all the other aldermen more comfortable?
Let me ask Ms. Callaway something. I understand your concerns, Mr. Callaway, of wanting to get this in there, and nobody is in favor of dark skylighting any more than me. But is there any way to assure that, Ms. Callaway, in the annexation stage? I don't know how to do that. So what are your thoughts? Does it do any good to I mean, I'm fine with tabling it until the next meeting, but what are we going to do in between that's going to make that a sure thing?
Are you asking if a condition can be placed on the annexation?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm not familiar with conditions like the one that has been expressed being placed on an annexation. It is more typical that type of condition be placed at the time of either zoning, if it's related to a zoning issue, or at the plating stage. Our city code, section 410-140, allows planning and zoning to place conditions on preliminary plats. And then that's usually routinely where that would occur. And one thing that we've discussed is amending our code to allow for like conditional overlay districts where you could allow for some more conditions to be placed on certain properties. But the bill can certainly be tabled. It sounds as if prior to this question, everyone was in agreement. So I don't want my answer to dissuade that. I was just answering your specific question.
Right. Well, the point I'm trying to make is that we all know that with our new ordinance, that a firm condition can be put on a plat. And that is something that we can do at the planning process. And my understanding of it is that I don't know how to do it at the annexation process, but I understand Mr. Galloway's desire to make sure that that's what happens, because once it leaves annexation, the Planning and Development Department approves the preliminary plat. And the next time we step in is to approve the final plat. So he wants to make sure that there is a dark sky provision in there. And what other time can we do that if it's not tonight?
Well, you technically will first see it after it's annexed at the zoning stage. And then you would see it potentially, maybe even at the same meeting for the approval of the preliminary plat, because nothing changed related to the conditions that could be placed on it at the preliminary plat. I know we're going to discuss that in further detail at future meetings, but the Board of Aldermen still see the preliminary plat.
Okay, so then we can be sure of that.
You
Go
can
ahead,
what?
Mr. Galloway. Go ahead, Bruce, were you saying something?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, we've been kind of all through this before. We don't have, what I'm asking of the developer is something that they're willing to offer ex gratia. And there isn't any ordinance that would require them to do it at the platting process. So they could simply just not do it, but I don't think this developer would do it. I just would like to find a way, some assurances between now and then that that issue in particular is addressed, because I do think that other issues are just addressed by the nature of the land that they're intending to develop. And for that reason, I moved the table for until the first meeting in June.
Okay, let me ask Ms. Calloway a question just for clarification. If we, and I don't care whether we deal with it tonight or the 1st of June, but what can we do, Ms. Calloway, between now and the 1st of June to make sure that Mr. Galloway is satisfied with this dark sky provision?
I'm not sure that I can answer that question. I don't know what could be done other than just a more comprehensive discussion about the 3-step process really for municipalities in developing property. But I'm not sure.
Well, I mean, I guess nobody has to do anything, but I would certainly like to do something, and I would like to have those discussions, but I'll yield the floor.
I've got 2 hands up, Mr. Poston and Mr. Forrest. So Mr. Poston, I think you were first.
Yeah, Your Honor, I'm not real comfortable with the direction that this is headed. I've got no problem with dark sky. You put dark sky on the agenda, I'll sponsor it and lobby for it tomorrow. I am not comfortable, and let me back up. I agree with everything Mr. Galloway said, or all of Mr. Galloway's concerns. And if he'll support us in changing laws, and let's start changing laws. Let's bring the pen out right now. I don't want to manage these situations just by conditions. I'm not comfortable with that. That's not the way I want to handle these. And so if this gets tabled, I'm not in favor of that either, but that's fine. But I'm really uncomfortable with this coming back at the next meeting and us placing conditions on an annexation. Let's change the law if we don't like the law. That's our job. We're legislators. Let's change the law. And I know that has been cumbersome. Don't believe me. I have been pushing to get some of these things done as hard and as fast as I possibly can. I'd love to have some more staff or some contracts with some consultants to make it go faster, but we're pushing it as hard as we can. And that's the proper way to handle these, in my opinion. I also think that some of the things that this board is going to hear about on Thursday, with the idea of considering law enforcement as an amenity that has to be calculated into these annexations and zoning processes, is the absolute right way to go. But if the law says that I have to take what's in front of me, then what's in front of me right now is, does a property owner, does this board want to annex 400 acres for a farm? That's what's in front of me. I don't expect it to stay that way forever. I know that the owners are going to come back and ask to have it rezoned. And I think that when they do so, I think they probably can see that there's going to be some battles. We've got some concerns, rightfully so. This is a massive piece of property. If you built 4 homes on every acre and took out the 50 acres that you were talking about, it's 300 acres. That's 1,200 homes. That is a massive piece of property to develop. We have concerns, but those concerns can be addressed through the processes we have and through changes to the law, not by more conditions added to. So I just wanted to say that I'm opposed to adding conditions to this under these circumstances.
All right, well, Mr. Galloway has made the motion to table it. Is there a second to table it?
I will second it.
All right, motion made by Alderman Galloway and seconded by Alderman Schaefer to table this until the June 1st meeting. That's what I understood, because we have to have a firm date till the June 1st meeting. All right. All in favor of tabling this, raise your hand and say aye. And okay, we have 5. Okay, we have 5 to table it. And Mr. Poston, yours is a nay, I trust?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
All right, all right. So this bill then will be tabled until June the 1st. And it's my understanding that we need to do have some sort of assurance, and Mr. Galloway and Ms. Calloway, you two are going to have to get your heads together and figure out what we can do. Because these people have the right to an answer, and they're fine with the next meeting, and they're clear with, or fine with dark sky. But figure out a way that we can get this thing satisfied. And we've got till June the 1st to do it, so get to work on that. All righty, that will be held over. Mr. Poston, Bill 3147.
No. Oh, sorry. I scrolled up, Your Honor. Yeah, you are correct. Your Honor, I move that we place Bill 3147 on its second reading.
Motion by Alderman Poston, seconded by Alderman Smith. Put Bill 3147 on its second final reading. All in favor? All righty. Ms. Calloway.
Just one moment, I have to get to it here.
You bet.
I'm sorry, I'm scrolling through all of the deeds that are attached to the annexation. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Amending the municipal code of the city of Ozark, Missouri, chapter 640, special events, and chapter 600, alcoholic beverages, to update the laws related to special events.
Okay, the second reading, any questions, comments? All right, Mr. Poston.
Your Honor, I move that we adopt Bill 3147 as ordinance 20-031.
Motion made by Alderman Poston, seconded by Alderman Galloway to adopt Bill 3147 as ordinance 20-031. Roll call vote, please.
Alderman Alder,
Aye.
Alderman Flores,
Aye.
Alderman Galloway,
You're muted, Bruce.
I know. Aye.
thank you.
You're playing with us.
Alderman Poston,
Aye.
Alderman Schaefer,
Aye.
Alderman Smith.
Aye.
We have 6 aye votes, motion carries.
All right, Mr. Galloway again. You're gonna need a bottle of water. Ordinance 3148.
Yeah, bear with me, please. I'm just experiencing a technical difficulty with my PDF.
You all are demonstrating the merits of having a notebook full of paper.
Well said, and I think you've said it before.
Well, I have, with a grin every time.
Okay. I move that we place bill number 3149, 3148 on its second reading by title only.
All right, Alderman Galloway, make a motion to put bill 3148 on its second reading. Alderman Smith seconded. All in favor? Okay, Ms. Galloway.
An ordinance authorizing the mayor to accept and enter into contracts for surface transportation block grant.
All right, Mr. Galloway.
Your Honor, I move that we enact bill number 3148 as ordinance number 20-031.
32.
32.
All right, motion made by Alderman Galloway. Is there a second? Mr. Smith to pass bill 3148 as ordinance 20032. Roll call vote.
Alderman Alder,
Aye.
Alderman Flores,
Aye.
Alderman Galloway,
Aye.
Alderman Poston,
Aye.
Alderman Schaefer,
Aye.
Alderman Smith.
Aye.
We have 6 aye votes, motion carries.
All right, Mr. Galloway again.
Your Honor, I move we place bill number 3149 on its second reading by title only.
Motion made by Alderman Galloway, seconded by Alderman Smith, put bill 3149 on its second reading by title only. All in favor? Ms. Galloway.
An ordinance of the city of Ozark, Missouri, authorizing the city to enter into a contract with DNS Equipment LLC for wastewater treatment chemicals.
All right, any questions or comments? All right, Mr. Galloway.
Your Honor, I move that we enact bill number 3149 as ordinance number 20-033.
Motion made by Alderman Galloway, seconded by Alderman Flores to adopt bill 3149 as ordinance 20033. Roll call vote.
Alderman Alder,
Aye.
Alderman Flores,
Aye.
Alderman Galloway,
Aye.
Alderman Poston,
Aye.
Alderman Schaefer,
Aye.
Alderman Smith.
Aye.
We have 6 aye votes, motion carries.
All right, city administrator comments. Anything?
Thursday,
Yeah.
breakfast meeting, 8:30 to 10:30. Lot of relevant topics to discuss. Heather?
What's for breakfast?
Whatever you're eating from your Zoom spot.
Wine and cheese.
Yeah, wine and cheese, yeah.
I have wine and cheese.
All right.
Lucky
Mimosa and cheese.
mimosa, I have that too.
Okay. All right, 8:30 Thursday morning. We have a written update from Cameron Smith. Any questions or comments to him? All right, do I hear a motion to say, we've had a good, Mr. Postman.
Yeah, I had two questions.
I was hoping you'd say something else.
I was, and I assumed it. It's only 10 o'clock. We've got another 40 minutes to go, right? No, two quick questions for Mr. Childers. One is, when are we going to start talking budget? When will you be ready to when will you have some data and ready to go down that road?
Well, we can talk about the budget anytime you'd like. We just received our May sales tax report. The May sales tax this year was down about only 2.4% from May of last year. So the only thing we can really do right now is just project. So it would be nothing more than a random projection as far as trying to determine if anything's going to go up or down.
What's
but-
the months for those taxes? Is that like January and February?
No, well, the May would have been mostly March. And so you're looking at really July and August are going to be the real kind of time when we can see what the COVID situation has done. You know, we've been doing a lot of analysis on just trying to make projections, and thank goodness the way that our city is structured as far as a revenue generating standpoint, you know, our restaurants, which would probably the most significantly impacted, only make up about 15% of the total revenue that we make in sales tax. So that's not a huge amount. And of course they did not produce anything during that time. So, but we can talk about budget anytime you'd like. If there are specific questions that any of the board members have about budget, or is it just projections that you're interested in?
I don't have anything specific. I want to stay on top of it. I know me and Alderman Schaefer have talked about this. We're both very concerned about it. I think the entire board is. You know, we haven't asked you to do anything yet. We did table one contract. I'm assuming you're already starting to dial back anything that you can, not spending even budget money that's been budgeted. I'm assuming you're trying to stop what you can.
The email went out probably over 40 days ago to all of the city department heads to only mandatory and necessary expenses. All travel has been frozen. All training has been frozen. I mean, of course, unless there is something that is mandatory that has to happen. And of course, we'll make evaluations on that as we are. But yeah, we're watching it very closely, and all the department heads, again, over a month ago, were already told that discretionary spending is not anything, and they're doing a great job. And I'll be honest, thank goodness that we've been working this year to be conservative. And you know, we've got some great information tonight from our insurance providers. That's going to be a savings. We got great bids due to the low oil prices from you know, our asphalt partners. And so, you know, with regards to that, our bids are coming in very good. So that's probably going to be something that's going to be a bright spot for us.
And then one last question, whether that is in chambers or at the OC in the gymnasium, when are we going to start meeting again in person?
Well, we can have a brief conversation about that at the breakfast meeting if you'd like. Today was the first day that the city facilities were actually, all the other facilities other than the OC were actually open to the public again. We have put up some safeguards in certain places, and of course more cleaning stations and things like that. You know, the court system has moved all of our municipal court proceedings to June. And so, Amanda, I think that's right, June. So we've actually ordered, what do you call it? Non-contact thermometers, where we will be testing everybody who walks in. We've got masks that we are required to provide if someone doesn't have one. The staff has been working hard to get prepared to accept the public again, I guess. So I am thinking we're going to be having a task force meeting with Christian County, all the leaders of Christian County, from mayors to school board superintendents to chamber directors to everyone. And we're going to be having conversations with our partners at Cox Hospital, because we're trying to understand what phase 2 is going to look like. And it was probably 4 meetings ago where I think yourself specifically made the suggestion or recommended strongly that we begin developing the plan of the what if, you know, what happens. And so we're working with Cox Hospital and all of our leaders on that. Clearly, our last order showed you that we may or may not be exactly what Springfield is. They have a different situation than we do down here. Although we are a transient community, we have a different balance we have to achieve. So I guess I'm looking at the end of June I'm being very cautious with all of your safety and with the safety of our public. I think our PIO department has set up an excellent system here. I don't know that any of us particularly enjoy it. I know I'm a personable person and I like to be in the room with you. This is a little weird for me, but I'm looking probably at getting through June. Unless you direct me otherwise, we can certainly go faster. But I was thinking having the meetings like this through June and then evaluating where we're at in July. That would be my recommendation.
I'm certainly not rushing anything. I don't want to endanger this board, staff, or the public. By no means. I just, I would, as soon as it's safe to do so, I would love to start meeting again in person. And even if that meant we had to change venue for a time and meet in the gymnasium or something at the OC. So I just, I'd like to have a plan to kind of start bringing us back together if we're ready.
Okay, and that is an
plan
option.
together is difficult because we initially, a firm plan. We initially started trying to be consistent with all of our neighbors, and our first order was, and then our neighbors to the north started being different. And right now we are in line with Republic and Nixon. But Greene County and Springfield aren't even in line with one another. In Springfield, steps that they announced in the draft on Friday are still more stringent than ours. So we need, like Steve said, it just is a moving target. But as far as I'm concerned, the sooner the better, because I don't like this. And we even do agenda meetings on Zoom, and I really don't like that. Okay, so that's the way it is, and we'll do it as soon as we can. All right, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, Mr. Schaefer, second by Smith. All in favor, leave the Zoom. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Yeah.